Well, welcome everybody to another correspondence of the Walt Brown hydroplate controversy. We've covered a lot of ground, and we're going to add some more to it. It's quite the journey. I hope you are finding it interesting and informative. And the reason we're doing this is because there's a theory that makes accurate predictions, and it's not being discussed. And one of the reasons may be this controversy. So we're going to shine some light on it so that hopefully it can be reconciled, and we can see the creation organizations and Walt Brown's idea working together instead of working against each other. You know, if we could, what is it? Dependence, independence, and interdependence. Those are the stages of maturity. And hopefully we can get this interdependence going with Walt Brown's gift of research and the big Creation Museum's gift in marketing. I think that could be a valuable, powerful witnessing tool. And so that's what we're doing, why we're doing this. And I will show you exactly what we're going to be doing next. Let's make this smaller. And okay, now we're going to go to show you how to find these documents to yourself. Go into hydroplate.org, go into hydroplate resources, down to hydroplate controversy. And then you go up to this timeline. So it's really a cool timeline. And we've covered this ground already. It started way back in 1988. And this is when they had to finally, Walt Brown addressed it. A quick overview. This is what happened. Walt Brown had discovered the breach point to make the Grand Canyon. Long story short, there was a disagreement about somebody said that Walt plagiarized his work. So he ignored that for a few years, and then it started to impact other ministries. So he had to deal with it. It was agreed that they'd have arbitration, but that fell through, and it went to mediation, and that fell through. So this is where we're at. We're up at 2008. We just went through the letter from Jeremy Schuler in December. Email from Jeremy and all those responses. We just did that the last time. And so now we're going to go to plagiarism at AiG Museum, July 6th. So then you can go into this and just click on it. And now you can see the documents. This is what the documents that you will see. And this is, okay, what's that top? Okay, going to the top. The original posting was July 6th, 2009. Then there were some updates, and then there's a revised version in 2018. So we will go through that in 2018. Well, I suppose maybe we better do it now. Okay, those coming into this link. Okay, helping or hindering. Yep, so we've done that. We've read those. Okay. Okay, this was revised in 2018 to incorporate updated references, minor edits for clarity, and support posting at bobenyards.kgov.com website. These update changes are highlighted in order to aid the reader who has already read the previous postings and wants to read the changes throughout. Okay. So this is what he said, introduction. This is in 2018. Okay, we should have already read, is AiG ICR helping or hindering? We've read that. And notice that some of this intro is repetitive, but some is not, and it is important. If you Google creation evolution flood, the #1 hit out of 218,000 is Dr. Walt Brown's website and online book, In the Beginning, Compelling Evidence for Creation and the Flood, 9th edition, copyright 2018. As part of Brown's detailed explanation of his, I think that should be, okay. As part of Brown's detailed explanation of his hydroplate theory for Noah's flood, and his In the Beginning provides a comprehensive presentation on the origin of the Grand Canyon, including details explained for the initial conditions and reason for them, the chronology of events, the mechanism and forces that created this incredible world wonder. When searching the internet for origin of Grand Canyon, Google instantly ranks Brown's Grand Canyon chapter of In the Beginning first out of approximately 2.1 million hits. Brown's explanation for the formation of Grand Canyon is the subject of this letter. Specifically, my motive for this writing is to expose the negative impact that Steve Austin's plagiarism of Brown's work has had to this day, including a display at AIG's Creation Museum. It is not about who gets credit for any discoveries. As a creation apologetic, as well as a past pastor, I'm appalled when creation ministries present poor science and incomplete explanations to the public. I have seen from my own experience that apologetic creation flood stories, which cannot withstand the rigor of scientific examination, can be worse than no answer at all. These false narratives set up Christian students for ridicule in their classrooms. In contrast, a clear biblically consistent and scientifically accurate explanation equips our students with a powerful defense and reinforces their faith in Christ as our creator and in the literal word of God. In early 2008, I became aware that the Answers in Genesis Museum was featuring Steve Austin's narrative of how the Grand Canyon formed. Austin now uses the name Canyonlands Lake instead of Grand Lake, the name Brown had given his now extinct lake in 1988 when he discovered how it breached its dam and set in motion events that carved the Grand Canyon. Further, unlike Brown's explanation, Austin's narrative is scientifically indefensible for reasons explained below. Since I was well informed in the history in this area, I sent an original version of the following letter and its attachments dated 14 March 2008 to AIG and ICR, and those named in the text of this document, neither AIG or ICR or any other individual addressees responded. Letter to AiG, subsequent plagiarized material in AiG Museum, version 4, posted July 6th, revised September 5th, 2018. July, okay. In April 2008, I distributed a clarified version of the same letter to nearly 200 creation organizations so that they could be aware of the bad science AIG and ICR were promulgating, as well as the history behind it. The second letter generated several streams of correspondence between various parties. I revised the letter in 2009 to incorporate the additional insights gained from those who responded and to correct a minor error I had made in the first two letters. AIG, ICR, Austin, Dr. Whitcomb, Dr. Holroyd were provided copies of my narrative and conclusions before I posted it in 2009 with my offer to correct any errors. Again, no response. So I did post this documentation on our church's website, but deliberately made it difficult to find by the casual researcher. I provided the direct link to individuals as requested. Given continued deceptions by Austin, AIG, and ICR, since then, I have decided to make the documents more accessible. By this September 2018, Update supports the posting of the narrative on Real Science Radio's website, pursuant Bob Enyart's June 2018 radio interview with HPT expert Brian Nickel on the Grand Canyon. Overview, updated 2018. The record clearly shows that between 1989 and 1992, Steve Austin, a geologist when working for ICR, plagiarized key discoveries of Dr. Walt Brown pertaining to the Grand Canyon breach dam explanation for a formation of the Grand Canyon. Some people noted the similarities, and Austin responded by accusing Brown of plagiarizing his work. As confusion mounted and threatened the ministry efforts of a friend of Brown's, Brown followed our Lord's instruction in Matthew 18 by approaching Austin and ICR privately. He requested that they cease their deception and correct the record with a limited number of people. Whoopsie, number of people. Let's see, I want to make it bigger for you. Okay, limited number of people. All right, here we go. Austin and ICR rebuffed Brown's attempt to settle the matter privately. Following the instructions of Matthew 18 and 1 Corinthians 6, Brown proposed binding arbitration using Christian arbitrators as an alternative to making the entire story publicly available. After initially agreeing in writing to binding arbitration with Christian men, Austin and ICR President Henry Morris II backed out at the last minute. Upon the counsel of their attorneys, they stated they would participate only in non-binding mediation. Reluctantly, Brown agreed to mediation. After hearing all of the testimony, the mediators instructed Austin to insert an errata sheet into the remaining stock of his Grand Canyon Monument to Catastrophe book, which would correct the record. Austin and Morris refused to insert the errata sheet in the existing edition or to correct the next printing. They then started spreading false gossip, stating that Brown had threatened or did sue them, thus casting aspersions upon Brown's character as a Christian. According to Dr. John Whitcomb, in a conversation with Brown, it was Henry Morris II who started this slander. Several high-level creation ministry leaders have repeated this slander to others over the year. They include Dr. John Whitcomb, co-author with Henry Morris, Dr. John Baumgartner, formerly of ICR, Dr. Don DeYoung, president of the Creation Research Society, and Mark Looney, chief communications officer for Answers in Genesis. As an example of this slander, Mark Looney of AiG wrote the following in an email to a nuclear engineer who was asking why AiG did not carry Walt's book. Quote, and since I wrote my last email to you, I discovered that Walt had not only threatened to sue an ICR scientist, but ICR's president as well. Then you wrote that I am not in the position to judge whether his reactions were appropriate. When you wrote, quote, I am not in the position to judge whether his reactions were appropriate, unquote, I would respectfully disagree. You are in a position to judge actions versus scriptures. It appears that you condone such behavior unless you don't believe the threats were actually made. You don't have to associate yourself with us if you wish, but why defend such a person who would even consider violating 1 Corinthians 6 and Galatians 5, unquote. So Mark Looney of Answers in Genesis rebukes a nuclear engineer for defending Walt Brown, who Looney falsely accuses of threatening to sue ICR/Henry Morris, something that would be unbiblical. Applying this same logic to Mark Looney, no one should support AiG for bearing false witness against their neighbor, the Ninth Commandment. It should be noted that I sent AiG all the documentation in the letter which follows below of what really happened months before Mark Looney made this and other slanderous statements in his emails. So AiG knew or should have known what Looney was saying was false. Proverbs 25:8, a man who bears false witness against his neighbor is like a club, a sword, and a sharp arrow, in KJV. Brown's discoveries and unique explanation for the origin of Grand Canyon make clear at least 24 enigmas that have plagued canyon researchers for centuries. No other explanation does. For decades, Austin and others in the AiG and ICR organizations have attempted to hinder the public, creationist and secular, from hearing Brown's explanation, while promoting their own incomplete and unscientific theories. Fortunately, the internet and independent creation science ministries have made this information available for those who wish to examine the evidence for themselves. Some will say the unprofessional and unethical lapses of Dr. Austin, AiG, ICR, and others that are documented in this posting should not be made public. To those people, I can only say that they are part of the problem which has hindered creation science for entirely too long. These men and organizations need to make truth a virtue they strive to achieve, even if it hurts. Pastor Kevin Lee, Calvary Church of Port Orchard, calvarypo.org. Okay, Pastor Kevin Lee's letter to AiG providing documentation of Austin's plagiarism and request that they remove the bad science from their museum. Original version, March 14th, 2008. Okay, so that would be 16, 17 years ago. To Mr. Mike Matthews, editor, Answers Magazine, Answers in Genesis, Hebron, Kentucky. Subject, plagiarized material in AiG Museum. Dear Mike, thank you for taking the time to talk with me on February 19th, 2008 about my concerns that AiG is using plagiarized material in its museum. In our conversation, you told me that you were unaware of prior accusations that Steve Austin had plagiarized information pertaining to Grand Lake that Dr. Walt Brown had discovered, presented, and published from his year-long study and fieldwork, 1987 to 1988, on the origin of the Grand Canyon. You asked me to summarize my concerns and send them to you for you to forward to AiG's legal department for review. This letter, the associated links, and the attachment are intended to fulfill your request. During the last weeks, I and others have carefully read most of the letters exchanged during 1993 and 1994 between Walt Brown and ICR's Henry Morris II and Steve Austin. Based on this record, we are convinced that Dr. Brown does indeed have priority on the Grand Lake explanation for the information of the Grand Canyon. We are not alone. The first to realize what Austin was doing were some who attended Austin's presentations. For more than 3 years, a few people familiar with Walt Brown's work had told Brown that Austin was using Brown's material without proper attribution and was accusing him, Brown, of plagiarizing Austin. Only when this falsehood threatened to have a large financial impact on a major video production of another creationist, Dr. Robert V. Gentry, did Brown feel he had to act. On June 21st, a Christian mediation panel of 3 attorneys and 1 retired federal judge reviewed facts of the debate between Dr. Brown and Dr. Austin on the issue. The lead mediator, Peter Robinson, associate director and assistant professor of law at Pepperdine University, wrote in a September 21st, 1994 letter to Austin that Austin was to stop using the name Canyonlands Lake when referring to Grand Lake, explanation for the formation of the Grand Canyon. Instead, Austin was directed to use Grand Lake, the name given by Brown, as a symbol of his commitment to reconcile with Brown and also as a way to acknowledge Dr. Brown's contributions regarding this body of water. Click here and go to Robinson's determination that Austin should call it Grand Lake since Brown discovered it. And we can click on that. Boom. All right. Yeah, it's in here somewhere. Austin utilizing the same name. He published it in revised version. All right. Okay. Impression meeting that controversy. Brown was one. Significant factors in the decision to bring it to the lake as Canyonlands. I believe Dr. Austin would have continued using this title, Grand Lake, had the controversy never arisen. He should now continue using the title Grand Lake as a symbol of his commitment to reconcile with Dr. Brown and also as one way to acknowledge Dr. Brown's contribution regarding this body of water. The scope of this determination extends to footnote 62 and the main text of his Grand Canyon guidebook. Oh, that was fun. 1 click away. Okay, let's see if we can go back. All right. Okay. Wow, that's fun. Okay, so that's what the mediator said. Also in 2001, when was that? That was 1994. Also in 2001, Julia Malfinger Orozco reviewed much of the same material when conducting research for her book, which included 1 chapter biographies of both Henry Morris and Walt Brown. In this book, Christian Men of Science, 11 Men Who Changed the World, she wrote, for over 100 years, geologists have known that if a large lake begins to erode at a point on its rim, canyons can be carved in days. Another geologist, Austin, had similar ideas. He published Dr. Brown's data on the elevation, name, location, and breach point of Grand Lake without proper crediting, then backdated his publication to a year before Dr. Brown's publication. This geologist also claimed that an even earlier obscure publication of his contained this explanation for the Grand Canyon. It does not contain this explanation. The claims of this geologist has caused confusion as who first published the data and who set forth this explanation for the formation of the Grand Canyon. Careful examination of the evidence indicates that Dr. Brown was the first. Christian Men of Science, 11 Men Who Changed the World, page 305, footnote 11. I have viewed your DVD titled Flood Geology and noticed that AiG is using the name Canyonlands Lake, giving credit to Austin as the Grand Canyon expert, hereby implying he was the discoverer and source of the explanation. The DVD, the DVD, and I assume your displays are entirely silent on Dr. Brown's discovery of this lake, properly named Grand Lake, and most importantly, the confirming details and mechanisms showing how and when it breached its rim to form the Grand Canyon in weeks. I am assuming that the errors in your DVD result from Steve Austin's failure to inform you of Dr. Brown's priority and discovery of Grand Lake and how it formed the Grand Canyon. Austin must have also failed to tell you that after Brown brought his concerns of Austin plagiarizing his work to Austin's attention, ultimately leading to Christian mediation, that he, Austin, tried to claim priority by referring to a small guidebook of his in which the copyright date had been falsely predated by 1 year. The publication was a field study tour guide to the Grand Canyon, which Austin published annually. Brown caught this deception by noticing that the dates of the other material referenced in 1988 copyright publication were published in 1989. When Brown confronted Austin of this fact, Austin said he accidentally put a title page with a 1988 copyright from the previous year's publication into the 1989 publication after originally claiming the 1988 copyright gave Austin priority. See April 8th, 1989 Grand Canyon Study Guide with the title page containing a false 1988 copyright. We'll see if it goes there. Let's see the copyright. There it is, copyright 1988. And let's see what the references are. See if they have the 1989, 1984, 1985. All right. So apparently in there, he references something from 1989. Okay, I'm not seeing it. But this is the reference guide, and it's got the 1988. And he claims he did that by mistake. Okay. Then read Austin's letter to Brown saying that the 1988 copyright proved his priority. Okay, this is the letter. And let's see if I can make that bigger for you at all. Okay. Enclosed is the April 1989 version of ICR's field guide. Copyright 1988. The text of that guide is a reprint of the 1988 Grand Canyon Fields Guide. That text was written in 87, then book printed in 88. It contains clear language. The breach point. These publications would appear to prove that I am the first creationist to propose the breach dam theory for the origin of Grand Canyon. That's in that fourth paragraph. Okay, and let's see what it says. That's what he wrote. And then read pages 6 to 8 of Brown's 2000 setting the letter straight to Austin, pointing out the false copyright. Well, let's see, page 6 to 8. All right, what page is this? All righty, guidebook here. Okay. 6 to 8. So this is where you can check that. You can go in here and read this for yourself. Oh, misleading. Yeah, you can read all about that. And we've read all these already, but that's just to show you where this is. Okay, 6 to 8. Okay, let's just search Command F 1989. And how about 1989? 1988. Okay. All right. Okay, so you can read that on your own time. Let's go back to the original. Okay. So the letter's pointing out the false copyright. This is very important to read for those who want to get a grasp of the amount of deception Austin is willing to use to cover up his plagiarism and bad science. Maybe we should see that again. Okay, very important. False copyright, 6 to 8. Okay, Holroyd's map, 1990. Draw the shoreline. Where did he get the 5,700-foot elevation? That's what Walt had said. He couldn't explain how he got it, allegedly. Okay, the second part is that Austin stated in our phone call that his June 21st letter that his map was copyrighted in 1988 and written in 1987, 1 or 2 years before mine. And he wrote that, we kind of read that already, 1988 gag ploy. The text was written in November of 87 and printed in February of 88. 88 contains clear language. This is misleading. Okay. All right. Okay, having a 1988 copyright on a book that was slightly modified and published in 1989 reminds one of backdating a letter or a check. The modifications were significant. So if you want more details, that's what he's talking about there. Okay. Also, for the first time in the 1989 edition of Austin's guidebook, link above, was a map figure of a lake, see page 54. It was drawn by Dr. Edwin W. Holroyd and given to Austin for his use in 1986, 2 years before Brown's fieldwork, discoveries, and lectures on the Grand Canyon in 1988. Holroyd's map figure showed a single unnamed lake that encompassed both Grand and Hopi lakes. Okay, see page 54. I think we did that. Tour guide. I think it's on here. This is the lake they're talking about. Page 54 must be this. Is that page 54? Yeah. All right. So that was that. Okie doke. Let's keep rolling. Okay. Showed a single unnamed lake that encompasses both Grand and Hopi lakes. Holroyd was not studying the origin of the Grand Canyon, but was trying to explain the absence of rock debris at the base of the cliffs. This led him to postulate one huge lake at 5,577-foot elevation. I think that's 1,700 meters. I think that's why the number is there. Situated east of the Kaibab Plateau, which is at an elevation greater than 8,000 feet. For Holroyd's or any lake to breach and carve the Grand Canyon, there has to be an explanation for how the water flowed 2,000 feet vertically up to traverse Kaibab Plateau, or how it penetrated a 30-mile wide dam of limestone that is less porous than concrete. Today, concrete dams only a couple hundred yards wide will hold back deep lakes. Although Holroyd provided the sketch to Austin in 1986, Austin did not use it in his guidebook until the 1989 edition. Instead, in 1988, the year Brown is lecturing and giving radio interviews about his discoveries of how Grand Lake breached at Marble Canyon and then carved the Grand Canyon, Austin's writings only muse about what if a torrent of water carved the canyon. See the excerpt from the actual 1988 guidebook. So this is what the lawyers are looking at, the excerpt from the guidebook. All right. So this is the guidebook that the lawyers looked at. Okay, so there's that. We're not reading it all, but in there somewhere, might be right here. The more I consider the theory that the Colorado River eroded the Grand Canyon, the more problems I had. Chief among them was the nagging question, where did all the sediment go? To the west of the Grand Canyon, there ought to be an enormous deposit of silt, sand, and gravel deposited by the ancestral Colorado River. Not just 1,000 cubic miles of eroded Grand Canyon strata, but an enormous quantity of sediment should be found from 70 million years of erosion of the entire drainage basin. My simple calculation showed that the muddy waters of the Colorado River now carry enough sediment to total 1 million cubic miles. If erosion operated slowly over 70 million years, no colossal delta of silt, sand, or gravel has been found. Instead, immediately west of the Grand Canyon occurs a thick limestone layer where there ought to be silt, sand, and gravel. I began to entertain the notion that what could be regarded as a geologist hearsay, the Colorado River did not erode the canyon. Soon I found comfort knowing that many other geologists also had dismissed the ancient river. For several years, I tried to devise an alternate way to leave the plateau uplifted and uneroded for millions of years. Okay, right down here, I'll go for, I supposed the original Colorado River, was diverted through the enormous gully. I freely admit that I was attributing the Grand Canyon to one of the world's most unusual natural accidents. My mind can no longer continue to think that way. Okay, so you can read this part on your own. We'll go back to the main text. Okay. However, he also mentions in the same guidebook several of the problems had to overcome by breaching explanation, but provides no solutions, answers, or evidence that can overcome these problems. To this day, only Dr. Brown's discoveries and theories solve them. However, in 1989, a year after Dr. Brown had begun lecturing and speaking on the radio about his detailed discoveries, Austin now inserts the previously ignored figure by Holroyd, but without revising his musings about the problems associated with the breaching dam. He also adds into the caption under the figure that the lake's elevation was 5,700 feet, exactly the same as Brown's elevation used in lectures on how the Grand Canyon formed, not Holroyd's elevation of 5,577 feet, 1,700 meters. Also inserted by Austin into the letter to AiG, subject plagiarized material in AiG Museum, version 4, posted July 6th, revised in 28, caption. Okay, wait a minute. I didn't have to read that. Okay, also inserted by Austin into the caption is the statement, ancient lake which breached its dam to form Grand Canyon. How did Austin's uncertainty in the preceding pages of the same guidebook, which does not even mention the lake, suddenly disappear? The evidence seems to suggest that the figure was inserted at the last minute before publication and there was no time to revise the other related narratives. Then Austin accidentally inserts the 1988 copyright page in the 1989 guidebook, even though Austin's caption now states with certainty that this ancient lake breached its dam to form Grand Canyon. He says nothing in the guidebook about the lake and therefore did not provide a scientifically acceptable explanation of how the lake penetrated or flowed up and over the high and wide Kaibab Plateau, nor has he to this day. When Austin purchased the 1989 edition of Brown's book in the beginning, a few weeks after it was published, finally admitted in writing by Austin, he was unable to learn a few of Brown's critical details. Dr. Brown's Grand Canyon information from the 5th edition. Okay, let's take a peek at that. 5th edition. This is from in the beginning, the 5th edition. All right. Oh, and this is, wow, a lot of sinkholes. What do they say that is? High altitude photograph of the Grand Canyon. Wow. Okay. Major mountains. So this is what's in his 5th edition. And you can go into these websites. Conclusion, the scientific ramifications of this working hypothesis are much broader than that described here and in the footnotes. Each of the 17 features has various other aspects that contradict the many explanations that have been proposed for the features over the years. Hydroplate theory seems to explain them all. Oh boy, that would be fun to read. Maybe if we get time, we'll come back. Okay, away we go. Back at it. Okay, where are we at? Okay, the 5th edition right there. Later, when Austin published the 1990 guidebook with the Grand Lake map, he had completely revised the discussion in this section. Not only did Austin show Holroyd's map on page 68, still mistakenly showing just one lake, he also included Brown's map without attribution, page 76, with Grand and Hopi Lake labeled, also without attribution to Brown pertaining to Grand Lake. It should be noted that for more than 3 years, Austin continued to use Brown's chosen name, Grand Lake, and its elevation of 5,700 feet instead of Holroyd's 5,577 feet, until challenged by Brown. Okay, let's take a look at this. This is his guidebook. Okay, there's the guidebook. There's, I think, Holroyd's drawing where there's no name for the lake. All right, and then we've got, oh, whatever that is. Maybe, I don't know, channeled scablands. Okay, yeah, that's what Brent's figured out, that up there was cut by a breached dam, glacial dam, breached dam. Okay, this is the little Grand Canyon of the Toutle River by Mount St. Helens. I can't make out what that is. Canyon north of Mount St. Helens, which was eroded after the summer of 1980 through a solid rock. All right. Goosenecks of the San Juan River south of eastern Utah. That's an interesting one that's hard to explain. All right. And apparently this is Walt Brown's drawing with Grand Lake and Hopi Lake, two separate lakes. What did I think he had those connected at the beginning on his? Yeah, I think. Interesting. Okay. Anyhow, you can decide for yourself what that means. And he had it at 5,700 feet somewhere, apparently. It would appear Hopi Lake. All right. Okay, that's the guidebook. All right. So there you have it. And you can read that on your time. Okay, guidebook in the Grand Lake. Okay, he's using 5,700 feet. That's Walt Brown's elevation. Okay, continued to use Walt Brown's chosen name Grand Lake and elevation until challenged by Brown. Only then did Austin change the name of the lake to Canyonlands Lake and then tried to make a case for a new elevation, 5,800 feet. Austin's published note 62, the missing talus. All right, and it goes through Canyonlands Lake. All right, elevation 5,800 feet. Okay, and he's calling it Canyonlands. Okay, but you can check that out. It's neat how those are all just one click away. Can make a case for a new elevation, 5,800 feet. Please note in this link that Austin states his lake at 5,000 feet is more accurate than Brown's at 5,700 feet, and that Austin's name for Lake Canyonlands at 5,800 is therefore preferred over Brown's Grand Lake at 5,700 feet. For details of how deceptive Austin is being when he makes this claim, please go to the detailed discussion in attachment 1 under Austin's published 62. Note 62. All right, let's do this again. All right, talus. Missing talus. Field evidence suggests Canyonlands Lake an elevation of 5,800 feet in many areas. A lake with significantly different shoreline and lower elevation was suggested by Walt Brown Jr. in the beginning, Phoenix. Brown used the name Grand Lake for his proposed lake in southeast Utah. Grand Lake of Brown, 1989, covers the mountains, these other mountains, whereas Canyonlands Lake did not occupy those areas. Holroyd's plotting is superior to Brown's, and the name Canyonlands Lake is preferred. Okay, so you get that perspective of it. Yeah, get all the information to come to informed conclusions. Austin's deceptions in Note 62 are exposed by Austin himself when he published an article in July of 2008 issue of ICR's Acts and Facts titled Red Rock Pass, Spillway of the Bonneville Flood. In reference 8 of that article, Austin states, early in 1987, I used a topographic map obtained by Dr. Holroyd to show that if the Grand Canyon were blocked today by a giant man-made dam with 5,700-foot elevation, Brown's number, not Holroyd's, who used 5,577 in the map he gave Austin, the lake formed would rise behind the dam to a maximum of 5,620 feet elevation and would extend into 4 states. The overflow location out of that lake at 5,620 feet would be 20 miles east of Kanab, Utah at Telegraph Flat. Interesting. Let's take a note at this note 62. Oh, yeah, that's what we were looking at. All right. And where Walt Brown says it was at 20 miles from Page, Arizona. Okay. So now, 2008, Austin is back at 5,700 feet, Brown's number. When in 1994, he said in his book's notes 62 that the reason for his lake was better than Brown's and deserved a new name, Canyonlands Lake, instead of Grand Lake, was because it was at the 5,800-foot level. People who don't tell the truth have a hard time being consistent with their stories until ultimately it becomes impossible. Those who do tell the truth don't have to keep track of what they said in the past. While Austin's original use for years of Brown's 5,700-foot elevation for the elevation of Grand Lake instead of Holroyd's 5,577 feet level may seem trivial, it shows the origin of what Austin was using, that is, Brown's work, without attribution. Map makers routinely insert a unique detail such as an intentional error or on their maps to catch anyone who is plagiarizing or infringing on the map's maker's copyright. Attachment 2, and exposes Austin's other attempt to cover his plagiarism. If you have not already done so, I strongly urge you to read Dr. Brown's explanation, including the evidence, mechanism, force, and energy involved in creating this wonder of the world, from his 8th edition book or at his website, creationscience.com. After doing so, you will see how limited and unsatisfying Austin's explanation is, as Dr. Timothy Heaton, professor of earth science at the University of South Dakota, documents in his critique of Austin's book when he wrote. Okay, before we do that, let's click this one, see where that brings us. Yeah, this is where you can go to see Dr. Walt Brown's book. Praise the Lord. Yep, it's still there. I'm not sure which edition it is. They might have updated it. Okay, let's go back and right where we left off. Okay, this is a critique of Dr. Austin's book, okay, by Timothy Heaton, professor of earth sciences in the University of South Dakota. For the most part, Austin's research is rigorous and deserves praise, but in the end, his logic fails on a count that is typical in creation literature. He never presents a comprehensive theory of how the flood took place, where the water came from, or how or from where it moved sediment to form the rocks of the Grand Canyon. In fact, most of these vital issues are never even mentioned. A single diagram is given showing inundation and supposed zones of sedimentation, suspiciously similar to a classic marine transgression, but presumably occurred much faster. But this raises far more questions than it answers. Without a comprehensive theory of the flood, there is no way to make a scientific comparison of any kind. So pointing out esoteric problems in the classic theory is trivial and misleading. It's trivial and very misleading. Okay, let's see where he did that. People, usd.edu. Is that going to work? No. Is this going to work? Yes. So this is where he wrote it, by Timothy Theory. And if you want to find out, just to put in misleading. Okay, there you go. Without a comprehensive theory of the flood, there is no way to make a scientific comparison of any kind. So pointing out esoteric problems in the classic theory is trivial or very misleading. Okay, there you go. Command F. What a valuable tool. Note, July 10th, this quote from Dr. Heaton applies to Dr. Austin's lack of a viable explanation for the flood. Okay, those who have read Dr. Austin's July 2008 Red Rock Pass Spillway of the Bonneville Flood article know that it provides only trivial and very misleading musings about how Grand Canyon could have been formed by a breached dam, as Dr. Heaton observed about Dr. Austin's 1994 book. Austin's articles and your museum, if you don't change your display, will be just as trivial 10, 20 years from now, because Austin could only plagiarize the name, elevation, and breach point into Dr. Brown's discovery, not the explanation that answers critical details of how it carved the canyon. To summarize the main point I am trying to make, the seemingly minor details of the lake's name, location, elevation, breach point, or who is credited with the discovery are not important in themselves. However, these items clearly identify Austin's plagiarism, which have resulted in a grave disservice to all creationists and those deceived by the evolution lie, but who are looking for answers from creationists. Austin has not, and cannot provide people with scientifically sound evidence or a logical explanation for how Grand and Hopi Lake breached the Kaibab Whoop. Brown's 38-page explanation is scientifically sound and does explain how, where, and in what sequence the lakes breached and formed the Grand Canyon. AiG and ICR have for many years ignored and slanderously marginalized Brown's contribution to the creation science field, thus trying to establish the false image, that AiG and ICR are the go-to guys for the best and most comprehensive information about all creation, flood, and young Earth topics. AiG's popularization of Austin's incomplete Grand Canyon story at their museum contributes to this deception and has the effect of hiding Austin's plagiarism, and the dozens of items of Brown's evidence that Austin cannot add to his book without further obvious plagiarism. AiG and ICR are acting like a VW bug dealer telling their customer not to bother going to the Porsche dealer because Porsche cars are laughable in their design and performance. That's pretty good. Some of us have driven the Porsche and we know the VW salesmen are lying. Soon everyone will know that the deception will be over and the God of the Bible will be pleased that it is, since he hates lying. Proverbs 6. With Brown's discovery that Grand Lake was separate from Hopi Lake and not connected, as Holroyd had thought, key questions could finally be answered. Furthermore, with Brown's information about where to look, the breach point is clearly seen on the ground and from the air, a key piece of speculative evidence. But still, Austin, not understanding the engineering mechanism and forces at work on the Colorado and Kaibab Plateau, he cannot explain the major events that lifted the Rocky Mountains in hours and elevated the Colorado Plateau by more than a mile. He also does not explain the filling and breaching of Grand Lake, the information of the Kaibab Plateau. Oh, wait a minute. He also does not explain the filling and breaching of Grand Lake, the formation of the Kaibab Plateau, the carving of the Grand Canyon, and finally, what produced spectacular features otherwise unexplained within a few hundred miles of the Grand Canyon. These mechanisms are only understood in the context of Brown's hydroplate theory, explanation of the flood of Noah, which AiG and ICR have shown no interest in understanding. Now, 16 years after Brown first confronted Austin about this plagiarism, the confusion caused by Austin's failure to set the record straight is increasing, and AiG's displays, videos, and DVDs are tarnished because of his actions. It is time to clear this up once and for all in order to present the clearest, most accurate explanation to sincere seekers looking for honest answers about the flood of Noah and its consequences, including the formation of Grand Canyon. Those who have read Dr. Brown's work are wondering why Grand Lake is misnamed Canyonlands Lake by Austin and AiG's museum. That's exactly what I thought when I went there. Okay, back to the letter. How can we Christians effectively defend biblical record and battle the evolutionist enemy if we can't even function with truth and integrity within our own camp? In the light of the 1, decades-long mistreatment of Dr. Brown by ICR, 2, the incredible patience of Dr. Brown has shown them in return, 3, even with all the damage that ICR and AiG have done to his work since 1984, and now 4, with Austin's deception now prominently displayed in the AiG Museum, I feel something more must be done. It is time to let the church and secular laymen and scientists who are interested in Grand Canyon read about this debate and determine the truth for themselves. To this end, I have prepared this third version of my letter to you with the internet that it will post at our website in the near future. Doing so will provide people with access to the detailed historical account of this far-reaching controversy. Our webpage will include links to related communications between Austin, Brown, and Morris, as well as the mediation panel. I would be happy to provide the links to these postings now if you wish. Until now, the record shows that AiG has chosen to ignore or remain ignorant of Austin's actions. I hope a positive change in your posture will allow me to update this posting with the fact that AiG did what was right based on the facts of this matter. May I suggest that you take the following actions, which were first proposed in March of 2008. Place an errata sheet in all remaining copies of your current edition of the Flood Geology DVD that states the actual name of Canyonlands Lake is Grand Lake. The name is given to it by its discoverer, creationist Dr. Walt Brown, who in 1987-88 made several key discoveries that support this theory that the Grand Canyon was carved in weeks as a result of the breaching of Grand Lake and a few centuries after the flood. 2, starting immediately, make the above announcement to all audiences who watch the video at the museum and or correct the audio portion of the user-activated displays to ensure those visiting the museum do not leave with misinformation. 3. Expedite corrections to the in-house audio-visual displays of this information. I suggest you work with Dr. Walt Brown on this. 4. Before the next production run of your DVT, remove all misinformation, visual and audio, as you did with the in-house displays. 5. Inform the authors of all books sold by AiG that if their books contain false information about the discoverer of the Grand Lake explanation for the formation of Grand Canyon and the naming of the lake, that you will stop selling them until an errata sheet is inserted to correct the errors. I suggest you refer them to our posting of the documents exposing Austin's refusal to comply with the mediation panel's resolution to this matter. Some may wonder why a pastor of a young earth creation, Jesus is the only way to be saved, Bible-believing church would take the effort to post something that may be detrimental to the creation message. The answer is simple. 1, more damage is being done by the lack of ethics and integrity among those who claim to love Jesus than will be done by exposing these lies. And 2, this letter and our church's internet posting may help to restore the needed ethics and integrity. Yes, this information will quickly move beyond the creation community, but I think that Dr. Timothy Heaton, mentioned above, deserves to know the truth too, don't you? Austin and to some extent ICR and AiG have shown little regard for accuracy and the truth. Austin's and Morris's actions over a period of many years have caused this waste of precious time, mine and everyone involved, but the time will be well spent if it results in correction. I pray that this letter will be a catalyst that will help the creation movement clean up its act now. Letter to AiG. In conclusion, I realize that even after the dozens of hours carefully reading and pondering the documents pertaining to this issue, I may have missed something and erred as a result. Therefore, I welcome you, AiG, and those I am sending a copy to, ICR, Peter Robinson, head mediator, Rob Yardley, who went with me in my face-to-face meeting with ICR in June of 2006, Steve Austin, John Whitmore, Edmund Holroyd, Mark Rashi, Bruce Wood, mentioned in the attachment below, to please inform me of any errors of facts contained in this letter so I can correct them before posting. Attachment 1 provides summary of links to some of the key correspondence. This version of Attachment 1 has been extensively expanded from the original to more clearly document Austin's deceptions. Attachment 2 contains various additional facts consistent with my assertions of Dr. Austin's ethical lapses. These facts were contained in the main body of my original letter to you on March 14, 2008, but have been further clarified and documented based on the responses of my April 9 letter. Thank you for carefully considering the matter. Pastor Kevin Lee, Pastor, Calvary Church of Port Orchard, Oregon. Attachments. Selected correspondence with links, facts associated with Austin's ethical lapses, copied to ICR, John Morris, Henry Morris, Lawrence Ford, Steve Austin, Mark Rashi, Peter Robinson, Associate Director and Assistant Professor of Law at Pepperdine University, Rob Yardley, Edwin Holroyd, John Whitcomb, and Ken Ham. Okay, 2008 update. Attachment 1. This is only a small portion of the entire record, but encompasses the main points. Note, some of the files are large and may take a while to load. Over a period of more than 3 years, several people had informed Brown and Austin was using Brown's material without proper attribution and accusing him, Brown, of plagiarizing Austin. Only when this falsehood threatened to have a large financial impact on a video production of another creationist, Dr. Robert Gentry, did Brown determine that he must act. His first step was to write this letter to Dr. Austin in accordance to Matthew 18. Moreover, brethren, Matthew 18:15, moreover, brethren, if a brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he hears you, you have gained your brother. 2018 update. Anyone reading this letter will observe Brown's gracious in his appeal to Austin to make things right. This letter should have been all that was necessary to convince Austin to do what was right, but Austin refused to act ethically and instead continued his deceit. Okay, letter, June 18th, 1993. Wow. So 32 years ago, this has been going on. Okay, we can click on this and take a look at the letter, apparently. This is the letter from Walt Brown to Henry Morris. And this is going to be the highlight. He highlights it for us. Okay, on the same day, Brown wrote ICR's former director, Henry Morris II, now deceased. During Brown's many days of studying creation and the flood, he discovered other instances where ICR publications plagiarized the work of other scientists. Dr. Brown sent an example to Morris by forwarded pages from former ICR employee Harold Slusher's book, Age of the Cosmos, 1980, showing where he had clearly plagiarized from Professor Stacy's book, Physics of the Earth, 1969. In his letter, Brown hoped that Morris would act appropriately against this example of plagiarism and stop Austin from doing the same with Dr. Brown's work. Okay, 2021 letter from Austin to Brown. You can see this too. This is from ICR replying to it, and we've read these already, but here's the highlight. Important 2018 expanded update. In this response, Austin to Brown, Austin claims that he came up with the same lake elevation and breach dam idea just a few months before Dr. Brown went public with his breach dam discoveries. As proof, he offers evidence of page 54 of his 1989 edition of his Grand Canyon Fields Study Tour Guidebook, which he claimed had the exact reprint of the 1988 guidebook, pointing to the 1988 copyright page at the front of the 1989 guidebook. However, careful comparison of the 1988 and 89 version of Austin's guidebook reveals the truth. In fact, Austin inserted a 1988 copyright page and page 54 with a lake and breach dam statement into his 1989 guidebook. His so-called 1988 edition included references to works published in 1989, which exposed his deceit. This act of fraud reveals Austin's premeditated plan to conceal his plagiarism of Brown's work. In the 1990 guidebook, Austin compounds his sin by using Brown's name for the lake, Grand Lake, and Breach Point, Marble Canyon, without attribution. 3 years later, Austin abruptly changed his name he used for his lake from Grand Lake to Canyonlands Lake. He then used this name change and others to very deceptively, he then used this name change and other very deceptive tactics, as documented in this posting, to cover his theft of Dr. Brown's discoveries. Tragically, these actions have created confusion for those trying to research theories on the origin of Grand Canyon. The most egregious aspect of Austin's shenanigans is that they keep affecting people to this day. Okay, let's do that again. The most egregious aspect of Austin's shenanigans is that they keep affecting people to this day. Many people read Dr. Brown's work and wonder why they have not been told about it by ICR and AiG, or why they didn't see it featured even as an option in the AiG Museum. Little do they know that the answer goes back to Austin's deception, which started in 1989. Then it escalated with the stance Austin took in this letter, the effects which continue to this day. In addition, Dr. Brown continues to be distracted by people accusing him of stealing Austin's discoveries. Some have stated that this accusation originated with Austin himself. In June 21st, in this June 21st, 1993 letter, and a year later in the mediation meeting, Austin denied that he had accused Dr. Brown of plagiarizing Austin's work. But after the mediation, Austin sends a letter to the mediator accusing Brown of this very thing, Brown taking his material without attribution. He does so by using a letter from one of his co-workers, Russell Humphreys, dated October 5th, and see attachment. This letter, which contains a number of erroneous statements, was conveniently sent to Brown shortly after Brown confronted Austin and ICR on the issue. Austin then uses this letter after mediation to sway the mediator's joint statement ruling, explained on page 5 below. Clearly, the proper action would have been for Austin to bring this letter to the mediation session for open explanation, instead of attempting to sway the jury, which is already ruled against him after the fact. swing the jury. It should be noted that neither Austin's nor Humphrey's letter give specific examples of what they claim Brown stole from Austin. They cannot because there are none. Even though Austin claims in his first response to Brown that he, Austin, was the first to come up with the breach dam based on his supposed 1988 copyright, that his own 1988 to 1989 guidebooks make reference to others before him who had surmised that the Grand Canyon was formed by a breach dam cataclysm. Specifically, on page 56 of both guidebooks, Austin cites the following reference work: Roger P.D. and Piles, M.R. 1980, Evidence of Catastrophic Erosion Events in the Grand Canyon, Proceedings of the Second Conference on Scientific Research in the Nationals Park. The authors present evidence for catastrophic drainage of large lakes within and to the northeast of Grand Canyon. Much of Austin's guidebook material came from geology training he received from others, but it appears now in his mind he thinks that he is the source of all basic geological information attributed to Grand Canyon. He refused to consider the fact that Walsh also studied from esteemed geologists, including Bob Dietz at Arizona State University. Dr. Brown received nothing of additional value from Dr. Austin. Austin contributed nothing to Brown's unique discoveries, as anyone can see when they compare Dr. Austin's book with Dr. Brown's detailed cause to effect explanation of how the Grand Canyon formed. As Brown acknowledged, others before him had suspected the Grand Canyon was formed catastrophically, but no one had been able to explain how or when, including Austin. To this day, only Brown's hydroplate theory discoveries explain how and where the Grand Canyon formation and many other enigmas of the canyon in a scientifically sound way as a consequence of the global flood. Okay, we're going to click this studied from esteemed geologist. Okay, let's see. There it is. Teaching job. And Dr. Robert Dietz, one of the world's leading geologists, taught. I wonder if I can do this. Yeah. Okay. Dr. Robert Dietz, one of the world's leading geologists, taught there several years earlier. In 1981, Dr. Brown had given a lecture on creation at Arizona State after the university had been unable to find an evolutionist debater. Days before the lecture, but Dr. Dietz asked if he could comment after the lecture. He talked for 10 minutes, giving his reasons why he thought Dr. Brown was wrong. Then Dr. Brown challenged him to a written, purely scientific debate, no religion allowed. Earlier that day, when Dr. Brown had lunch with Dr. Dietz had flatly refused to participate in a written debate. But now that he was in front of this large audience, he agreed. The audience applauded, and the newspaper featured the upcoming written debate. Dr. Brown and Dr. Dietz exchanged a few cordial phone calls, working out the rules and the written debate. A month later, though, Dr. Dietz called. I've tried writing something on this and said there is no way you can avoid religion. I can't do it. Are you backing out, Dr. Dietz? I guess so. You can deal with the subject without, I guess so, he said. You can't deal with the subject without getting into religion. You sure can, Dr. Brown said. I will. But Dr. Dietz backed out. Since then, no evolutionist has taken up Dr. Brown's well-known, often offer of a written, published debate, purely scientific debate. There you go. Okay. All right. Okay. June 22nd, letter from Morris to Brown. And you can click this and check it out for yourself, which is kind of cool. Make it easy on those lawyers. Okay, sadly, Morris chose to minimize this obvious case of ICR's plagiarism of a secular scientist's work and defended Austin. He hinted that he may remove Slusher's book, but then backtracked and deflected in later correspondence. More than a year later, Morris told Brown that this book was out of print, out of stock, and would not be reprinted. Several weeks after Dr. Brown received the assurance of from Dr. Henry Morris, Brown purchased this book from ICR. Oh boy. So it's out of stock, would not be printed, and yet he could buy one. July 6th, letter from Brown to Austin. Setting the record straight. Update. Brown's letter clearly lays out the facts surrounding this contribution to the Grand Lake discovery and his contention that Austin plagiarized his work, including Austin's 1988 copyright deceit. Over the next year, Brown exchanged many letters with Austin and Morris. These letters were also posted soon at our website and are available upon request. Brown asked only that Austin ICR stop the false statements and correct the errors, which they refused to do. Yeah, setting the record straight. That's, I think, where this is either the first or second round. This is rather lengthy. This is Walt Brown laying it all out, setting the record straight. That is July 6th. I'll take a screenshot of that because that should be noteworthy in the timeline, setting the record straight. Okay, June 22nd, 1994, notes of mediation between Brown and Morris and Austin. Okay, now this is a must read if you want to know what happened at mediation. These are all Walt Brown's notes, phenomenal. Oh my goodness, especially the last part. Oh, but anyway, you can read this on your own time. But yeah, this is amazing. Despite the detailed evidence that Dr. Brown presented, Morris and Austin denied any wrongdoing and tried to sidestep the issue. Brown responded that since they could not reach an agreement, they should both submit in binding arbitration with an independent, knowledgeable Christian arbitrator. For 6 weeks, Morris refused, finally agreeing only when Brown said that he would no longer keep the matter private unless he did agree to arbitrate. Over the next 7 weeks, Morris and Austin proposed 2 arbitrators, and upon checking, Brown discovered that both proposed arbitrators had previous ties to ICR. Dr. Brown insisted that the arbitrator be independent of both organizations. Finally, ICR agreed to use a Christian arbitrator and mediation service in the Los Angeles area. Morris then sought legal advice, and he was told that he and Austin should not submit to binding arbitration. However, Morris and Austin did not tell Brown they were withdrawing their written agreement to arbitrate until 4 days before the scheduled Christian arbitration at Pepperdine University. And Walt Brown says it was 2 working days before the Pepperdine University arbitration. At that time, Austin and Morris announced that they would only mediate. Arbitration results in binding decision, while mediation seeks harmony and understanding. With airline reservations and preparations made, Brown was faced with a dilemma. Should he cancel everything or proceed with mediation? Brown knew that mediation would not force Brown and Austin to comply should the ruling go against them. Reasoning that after a year of correspondence, something is better than nothing, Dr. Brown agreed to mediate. In hindsight, this decision was a major mistake. When mediation took place on June 21st, just an aside here, I think he wanted to mediate and then arbitrate the things they couldn't agree on. I think that's what he wanted to do. But that fell through too. When mediation took place in June 21st, 1994, a tape recorder was not used as Brown had requested. This letter is Brown's memorandum of what took place at the mediation. Brown wrote this memorandum hours after the mediation and forwarded it to all parties asking for any corrections. He received no response. As you read Brown's note of the mediation, be sure to note how Austin was clearly caught in a lie that all in the room heard. It is also critical to note that the mediation board concluded that Austin's book needed to be corrected, not that Brown was in error to accuse Austin of plagiarizing his work. It was generally understood that Austin's book contained false statements about Austin's discovery and about Brown and his discovery. During mediation, and despite a year of requests by Brown, Austin failed to provide one piece of evidence showing that he wrote about Grand Lake and its elevation at Breach Point before reading it in Dr. Brown's book. It appears to me, after reading the meeting minutes, that the lead mediator, Pete Robertson, walked away thinking Austin, being a good Christian man that he was, would see the errors of his ways and quickly work with Brown to acknowledge and correct them. Peter probably thought that his remaining role would be a simple task of playing referee about minor details or wording. Boy, was he in for a surprise. After the mediation, a contract was signed, which Austin and Morris soon broke. Brown has no desire to pursue the matter in civil court. Okay, it talks about him being caught in a lie. So let's go up to that, being caught in a lie. Let's see, where is this? The notes on mediation. Caught in a lie. Go down. It's probably going to be on the last page. Let's just review this for those who haven't heard it before. Okay. Let's see. The meeting broke up. Okay. The memorandum was written. Oh boy, where is that caught in the lie thing? Okay. Oh, where is it? Oh, it doesn't even look like it's in there. Well, that's not right. I'm gonna have to fix this. Okay, here, wait. This is it. No, it's in there. Some final loose ends. That's where it is. What page on this? This is page 9, I think. Yeah, page 9. Some final loose ends. I asked Austin if he had recently mailed a letter asking for criticism of me. Austin looked puzzled and said he had not. I looked him in the eye, waited for a few seconds, and said that he had done so. A few more seconds of silence passed. You even sent a draft of what you wanted said, but asked him to put it in his own words. You suggested it say Walt Brown had taken work belonging to others and some people were bothered by it. Finally, you said there was no need to contact Walter Brown. More silence while I decided whether to mention my sources of information. You sent a letter to X. Austin, then you said that he had made Austin then said that he had made a phone call to X. I contradicted Austin, saying, no, you sent a letter, and that letter was read to me over the phone. I repeated the gist of his letter. Austin finally agreed that he had. I asked him why he had not contacted me first, if he felt I had done something wrong. Austin did not answer. I told him doing so would be the biblical approach, and he might have been surprised had he done so. I then asked Morris, Henry, were you aware that Steve was doing this? Morris stammered, but didn't answer. This spoke volumes. I then said, this is an example, Henry, of derogatory and damaging things from ICR being spread about me. Finally, with a puzzled look on his face, Morris seemed to recall hearing about some contact being made with X. Austin then told us what X said. Again, I had to contradict Austin. X only declined to make a statement. I know because X sent me a copy of his letter back to you. Austin was silent. Austin had just been caught lying. I didn't dwell on it, but everyone in the room heard it. I've always been impressed with how sincere Steve Austin sounds when denying any wrongdoing. Even with the evidence of his false statements in front of me, his denials have sounded so convincing that I wondered if somehow the evidence was wrong or if he had fooled himself. It's always best to follow the evidence. Okay, so that's the lie that he was caught in. Okay, and we did that. The book count dispute. Everyone agreed. Okay, and this is, you can check this out too. The book count dispute. This is the letter of September memorial memorandum. Okay, here we go. Yeah, this is rather interesting too. Okay, book count dispute. Everyone agreed during the mediation that Austin would prepare an errata sheet and insert it in every unsold copy of his book, Grand Canyon Monument to Catastrophe. Minutes before the mediation, Austin had a new thought. He proposed that there be no errata sheet because he said the January 1994 edition was almost out of print and a new edition would soon be printed. Brown agreed if Austin's book inventory was less than 1,000 copies. Therefore, Austin's first duty was to give Brown the number of his books that were still unsold. If the count was greater than 1,000, then an errata sheet was to be inserted into Austin's remaining books to correct the misinformation he had previously published. This memo documents Austin's delays, deceptions, and outright refusal to come up with that number, which eviscerated a good agreement, as Brown would later write to Peter. Brown's appeals to Henry Morris and Peter Robinson were ignored. Okay, so let's look at this. The book count dispute. So the lawyers could go through this too. And the most interesting thing is way down at the end. We're just going to go, yeah, it's rather interesting. Okay, please let me know the number of copies July 5th. The first printing of the book will soon be exhausted, Austin replies. He faxed him saying, well, please let me know how many copies of your book were printed and how many remained in June 21st. And Austin returned it and said, how many books remained? We should be working on the content. Okay, the books were not inventoried. We're running low. And Brown wrote Austin on August 5th, sincere was not, was sincere since okay, it was safe to conclude that more than 1,000 books remained on June 21st. Austin was to contact Brown if that was incorrect. Okay, and he wrote that he had just, Austin called Brown and said he had just counted the number of books in the warehouse, only 750 copies remained. And Brown said that, okay, he could say how many remained on June 21st, okay, where they could reprint. Brown explained why the last two questions would allow us to estimate how many books remained on June 21st. August, Austin wrote, less than 800 copies of the book remain, thus we need to prepare for a second printing. September, Brown wrote Peter Robinson, the lead mediator, with a copy going to Austin and discussed in detail the book court count issue. We needed to know how many books remained, not how many were in the warehouse. Many books are in packing and in shipping areas. Brown explained that Don Rohr most certainly had the answer at his fingertips. September, Brown called Austin and asked if he would join Brown in a conference call to Don Rohr and asked how many books remained. Austin was adamant, I will not. Brown said that he would then call Dr. Rohr himself. Austin said that Rohr would tell Brown, it's none of your business. The next day, Brown called Dr. Don Rohr and explained why he needed to know how many copies remained. Rohr said that more than 1,100 books remained in August, and inventory is taken each month. So, a lot of deception going on there. Austin buries the lead mediator, Peter Robinson. Ooh, I don't know if we read this one. Okay. We might come back to that. Okay, we'll just hit the highlights to this. I'm not sure we read this one. Austin was given a simple task to fix the false statements in his book. Apparently, to avoid this professional embarrassment, Austin sent a barrage of documents that include reinventing history surrounding the Grand Canyon, trying to persuade Robinson to minimize the required corrections to his soon-to-be-published second edition and to insist that his book be allowed to continue using the name Canyonlands Lake instead of Grand Lake. Austin's tactics forced Brown and Robinson to expand additional dozens of man-hours digesting, understanding, and refuting these new arguments. Brown and Robinson now find themselves spending more time dealing with Austin after the mediation than they did in the mediation itself. Austin may have counted on Robinson's lack of knowledge about Grand Canyon geology and history to be an advantage in accomplishing his apparent goal of pushing the mediator into an overload reaction. So let's see what he sent him. Austin buries the lead. Okay, so he sent this, and then he sent this thing, and Appendage C. We might have read some of these, and I think Walt might have responded to some of these. He's burying them with information and more information. Why no longer use Grand Lake and and more information. And there's the map, and here's another map, and another map, and there's another map, and another map. And it goes on and on. All right. So he sends them all this technical jargon, trying to change the mediator's mind. Okay. Brown also sent a letter to Peter Robinson rebutting Austin's argument. We read that one. Yep. September 21st, direction from mediator Peter Robinson to Brown. Yeah, I know we read this one. Yep, we read this because his are indented, I believe. Oh, maybe not. Oh, yeah, we might have something else to do. Wow. Yeah, so we'll just continue on. Maybe if we get time, we'll go back into that. And that was the Brown's letter to Peter Robinson. All right, let's see that. Let's highlight that. That's what I'm interested. Okay. Okay, September 21st, 1994, direction from mediation, Peter Robinson to Brown and Austin. Peter Robinson, lead mediator. I think I might have read this. Okay, but let's get the highlights from it. So all this is going to the lawyers at AiG. Peter Robinson, lead mediator, wrote in this September 21st, 1994 letter to Austin and Brown that Austin was to stop using the name Canyonlands Lake when referring to the Grand Lake explanation for the formation of Grand Canyon in the next edition of his book. This letter was after 3 months of delay and confusion tactics by Austin about how Austin's endnote 40 and 62 were to be read and about the naming of the lake. Austin was also told to put the following statement in endnote 40. In 1989, Dr. Walter T. Brown Jr., in proposing the hydroplate theory, also proposed where a very large lake at an elevation of 5,700 feet once occupied much of southeast Utah and parts of Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico in the beginning. Brown called it Grand Lake and suggested that its breach point is what was now Vermilion Cliffs and Echo Cliffs, together with the breach point of Hopi Lake, formed the Grand Canyon. Please note how Robertson starts the last sentence. Brown named it Grand Lake and suggested. In November 14th, 1994 letter, Robinson changes it to Brown named it Grand Lake and wrote that it, emphasizing that Brown was the first to write about this lake. Also, in this letter, Peter Robinson proposed a joint statement that would be the press release groomed for public consumption. It was determined at mediation that this statement would be agreed to and signed by both parties. It was never signed, and instead ended up only being a preliminary because Austin refused to give up and instead started to barrage Robinson with more disinformation. Austin takes Robinson back to the ring. What does he send him? Probably a boatload of stuff. Okay. All right. Yeah, and we read this. Yep, and we read this, some of this anyway. So more and more reasons for him not to do what the mediator said he should do. This link This link opens correspondence to Austin to argue that Robinson did not have the authority to dictate the name of the extant lake, Grand Lake, since the name had already been used elsewhere. Austin used the name Grand Lake for 3 years, admittedly having stolen it from Brown. But now, by golly, the feds will be pounding on Robinson's door if he makes Austin go back to using it. Austin also wants the joint statement to be changed to reflect that he thinks Brown plagiarized his work. It was this false charge against Brown that first caused Brown to confront Austin, and Austin denied that he had ever accused Brown of plagiarizing his work. Now, outside of mediation, Austin brings this false charge against Brown to Robinson and wants the joint statement to look as if Brown and Austin are equally claiming fault with the other. Brown is fed up with Austin's action and does not invest the time and energy to fully rebut these lies by Austin. Final letter from Robinson. This is November 14th. Robinson caves into Austin. Oh, that's a shame. Okay, let's get the highlights of it. Tragically, more countless hours of dealing with Austin's last appeal. Robinson caves in and retracts his determination that Austin must change the name back to Grand Lake and instead makes it a suggestion. He also rewords the joint statement to include that the mediation covered Austin's charge that Austin used Austin's work without attribution. This was blatantly false statement and was never signed by Brown. It was therefore not a joint statement. The following was an email I sent to Austin and best explains how I see this desperate and partially successful attempt of Austin. This is April 30th, 2008. from Pastor Kevin Lee to Steve Austin. Steve, I'm not surprised that you still didn't get it. I will be surprised if AiG doesn't get it. The book Canyonlands Lake, A Monument to Plagiarism will be written. The truth will be told widely and disseminated. Your ability to deceive with impunity has ended. It should be obvious to you that there cannot be two names for the same lake. Had you taken Peter Robinson's advice about going back to the name Grand Lake, there would have been a godly conclusion to the dispute. Instead, you chose to keep the name Canyonlands Lake after using Grand Lake for 3 years without attribution to Brown. After being confronted by Brown, you changed the name to Canyonlands Lake and then published your book, Grand Canyon Monument to Catastrophe, with this false name and many false statements in order to hide your plagiarism. This first edition of your book was before mediation. At mediation, it was determined that there were false statements in your book and needed to be corrected. Peter wrote that the name Grand Lake was to be used in future printings. You knew that if this determination about the lake's name stuck, the next edition of your book came out with corrections of false statements, and it returned to the name Grand Lake, then all readers would see that you did plagiarize Dr. Brown's work in your guidebook and first printing of your book. You knew this would be the case even if Dr. Brown never told people you plagiarized his work. You were at a fork in the road, Dr. Austin, and you took the wrong path, a path of deceit that is going public because of your intransigence. Oh, that's an interesting word. We're going to check that out. Intracrengence. We're going to learn something today. Okay, we're going to jump over here and we're going to type that in. All right, what does that mean? Unwillingness to change one's view or to agree, a state of being intransigent, trait of being transigent, stubbornly refusing to compromise. Okay, that's what they say. All right, back at it. Okay, honesty, integrity, and professionalism, etc., demand that you return to the fork, repent, and do what is right. Let the man who discovered Grand Lake be allowed to keep the name, as well as attributing to him his discovery of the breach point, the breach theory, etc., and correcting other false and misleading statements in your endnote 40 that were written by you to try and cover your plagiarism. Dr. Austin, I know you are aware that if the name Grand Lake is used to describe that a now extinct lake, the feds are not going to be locking up Dr. Brown or shutting down the AiG Museum because there is a point with the same name in Colorado. There's a pond with the same name in Colorado. Why did your last desperate attempts to deceive Peter Robinson include this garbage argument about Fed requirements for naming things? Peter's original determination that you changed back to Grand Lake was because Brown discovered and named it. If your true motivation was to please the feds about the name of a lake, but you also wanted to be godly and complying with the spirit of the mediation agreement, then you would have given attribution to Brown for your Canyonlands Lake. But having a godly attitude was not your motive. You were desperate to hide your plagiarism. Your endnote 62 is a deceptive lie, as all who have carefully read history clearly see. There is nothing to hide anymore, Dr. Austin. Everyone who reads the history with documentation will know the truth. The further you try to go down the wrong road, the more you are going to be sinking into the axles. I implore you to give it up and do what's right, no matter how painful it is. The alternative is worse, according to the word of God. Kevin. It should be noted that I never received a response to this letter. Austin's published note 62. Robinson's September 21st, 1904 directive to Austin. Okay, you can see this. There it is. Rather, they're short. Pepperdine University. Okay, we read some of that back and forth, but this is it. Okay. Robinson wrote, accordingly, I believe that Dr. Austin would have continued using the title Grand Lake had this controversy never arisen. He should now continue using the title Grand Lake as a symbol of his commitment to reconcile with Dr. Brown and also as one to acknowledge Dr. Brown's contributions regarding this body of water. The scope of this determination extends to footnote 62 in the main text of the Grand Canyon Guidebook. He meant Austin's book, Grand Canyon Monument to Catastrophe. Because Robinson's changed his September 21st determination that Austin returned to using Grand Lake in a recommendation that Austin do so in his November 14th, 1994 letter, Austin ignored Robinson's recommendation and proceeded to publish his false statements about the history of his Canyonlands Lake discovery in note 62 of the second edition of his book. I beg the reader to carefully compare Austin's published November 1994 note 62 with the July 2008 article published in ICR's Acts and Facts titled Red Rock Spillway of the Bonneville Flood. First, let's consider Austin's published 1962 map or note, or published note 62. And this is where you can find it. Okay. The name Canyonlands Lake is introduced here for a lake which occupied the major portion of the extraordinary canyon country of the southeastern Utah. The outline of the lake was first suggested by computer plotting by Edwin W. Holroyd, Creation Research Quarterly. Field evidence suggests Canyonlands Lake was at elevation 5,800 feet in many areas. A lake with significantly different shoreline and lower elevation was suggested by Walt Brown in the beginning. Brown used the term Grand Lake for his proposed lake in southern Utah. Grand Lake of Brown, 1989, covered the LaSalle Mountains, the Abajo Mountains, the Aquarius Plateau, whereas Canyonlands Lake did not occupy these areas. Holroyd's plotting is superior to Brown's, and the name Canyonland is preferred. There is a significant false statement in Austin's 1994 note that must be addressed before moving on to what Austin wrote in 2008. The outline of Grand Lake, Austin's Canyonlands Lake, was not first suggested by Holroyd. Click here to see my correspondence with Dr. Holroyd. Let's see, click here. Okay, there it is. Okay, so all these are documents. I'll click, okay, Dr. Holroyd's outline, which was based on a computer plotting from detailed topographical elevation data that he had access to as a result of his job with the government, was a single and larger lake combining Hopi Lake with Grand Lake. The truth is that Dr. Brown was the first to discover, lecture on, and write about a lake, Grand Lake, that was separate from and at different elevation than the previously, decades earlier, discovered extinct Hopi Lake. I wonder if that's in that letter. Maybe no diagrams. Wow, that's quite a letter. Whoa. Wow. The plot thickens. Okay. In his published 1994 note 62, Austin also makes misleading statements that are nearly impossible to discern without having a deep understanding of the facts. For example, it is true that Brown's first publication of the location of Grand Lake did not include a topographically accurate shoreline. Brown had discovered the elevation where Grand Lake breached at Echo Vermilion Cliffs, but Brown only utilized this rough elevation data for the hundreds of thousands of square miles that defined the lake's shoreline by being either above or below Brown's 5,700-foot level. Therefore, Brown's first published edition of the Grand Lake shoreline did not show the islands, LaSalle Mountains, Abajo Mountains, and Aquarius Plateau inside the lake, which were higher than the shoreline, nor was it important to do so. I know this is confusing, but carefully think about the absurdity of Austin's argument. Austin's Canyonlands Lake is at 5,700 feet, is better than Brown's 5,700-foot lake because it doesn't cover the islands inside the lake. How does a lake with a higher level not cover more land? And Holroyd's plotting at 5,700 or 5,577 feet, lower than Brown's, but in error because it joins Hopi and Grand Lake, is more accurate. I doubt that anyone who has ever read Austin's book has picked up on this deception, but Austin must have certainly known that he was being deceptive. Austin is using mumbo jumbo to try to make the reader think there is truly a substantive difference between Brown's and Austin's lakes, where in fact there is not, and Austin must have known it. The significance of Brown's discovery was not the exact shoreline of Grand Lake, but the fact that Grand Lake was separate from Hopi Lake and that the location of where it breached. With this knowledge and understanding of the physics that would come into play as a consequence, Dr. Brown was able to unravel 24 mysteries of how the Grand Canyon was formed, mysteries that for centuries have plagued those who have studied it. As a final note, it is true that Holroyd's plotting was superior in topographical accuracy, but it is based on the topography of today, which would show Hopi Lake and Grand Lake joined. But Brown's discovery was that Grand Lake breached at Echo Vermilion Cliffs, causing the release of billions of gallons per minute water from Grand Lake to undermine the sediments holding the higher Hopi Lake until Hopi also breached under removing hundreds of vertical feet of lake wall, thus unleashing additional billions of gallons per minute of Hopi water, which combined with Grand Lake water, carving the Grand Canyon. With the sedimentary layers of Hopi Lake now removed, any damming of the extinct Colorado River would create one massive lake that joined to the now extinct Hopi and Grand Lake. This is the fact that separates the work of Austin and Holroyd from the discoveries made by Brown. Now that we have covered Austin's published false statements from his 1994 book, let's compare them to the germane portion of what Austin published in his 2008 article, which was published in ICR's Acts and Facts, Red Rock Pass, Spillway of the Bonneville Flood. Austin writes in 2008, in 1986, I began the process of mapping the possible shores of the giant lakes east and north of Grand Canyon. In addition to Hopi Lake east of Grand Canyon, we recognized evidence for at least two large lakes in Utah. The largest of these lakes, what I called Canyonlands Lake, was in northern Arizona, southeastern Utah, and northeastern New Mexico, and western Colorado. Where is associated endnotes 8 and 9 read, early in 1987, I used to use topographic data to show that if Grand Canyon were blocked today by a giant man-made dam with 5,700-foot elevation, the lake formed would rise behind the dam to a maximum of 5,629 feet elevation and would extend into 4 states. The overflow location out of the lake at 5,620 feet would be 20 miles east of Kanab, Utah at Telegraph Flat. Number 9, Austin's Grand Canyon Monument to Catastrophe. See pages. Okay. All right. Let me see where Kanab, Utah is, or Telegraph Flat. Let's take a look at that. Let's take a look at maps. Let's Google Maps. Let's do maps, whatever. Maps, MapQuest. All right. What was that called? Telegraph Pass. Telegraph Flat. Let's take a look at that. Telegraph Flat. Maybe we're going to have to go to, let's try Google. Google Maps. Google Maps. Well, Google Maps. Okay, not that. Google Maps. Will they be able to find Telegraph Flats? No, it's going to be in Utah. Where was it in Utah? It was in Kanab, Utah. Let's try that. Let's find Kanab, Utah. I don't want to know where that is. Telegraph Flat. Let's zoom out. Where are we at? We in Utah? Page, Arizona. Oh, that's interesting. It's interesting. Okay. So what does this mean? Okay. Here's the Grand Canyon. Where is it? Grand Canyon. Vermilion Cliffs. Grand Canyon's going to be in here. Okay. Yeah. Let's see. Sedona. Absolutely. You know what would be really neat is if we can find the topographic map. Yeah, this one here. This one's really cool. This is topographic-map.com, and we're going to go into Grand Canyon. Or no, let's go to Telegraph. Where are we at? Telegraph Flats in Kanab, Utah. Where are we at? Where was that? Kanab, Utah. Kanab, Utah. Kanab, Utah. Whoops. Wait a minute. I'll just search Grand Canyon. That's really cool. Okay. Grand Canyon. So let's zoom out. Grand Canyon. So you can click anywhere and get the elevation. This is a really cool. This is how I figured out where it flowed in and where it flowed out. Let's make that Grand Canyon. We're going to make it big. Oh, that's not what we want to do. We have to do it over here. This is what we do. Oh, we're going to go back out. Okay, so you see this funnel right here. That's where Walt Brown says the Grand Canyon flowed out. Page, Arizona should be right in here. This is the funnel. Where is that? All right. But anyway, Kanab, Utah. Okay, there's Grand Canyon. Going right through the Kaibab Plateau instead of going around it. Oh, that's Marble Canyon. That's Little Grand Canyon. Okay, this is where we see the funnel. This is the breach point. This is upstream. We'll make that smaller so you can see how it relates to Grand Canyon. This is where the big Grand Lake is, right here. Let's make this bigger, maybe. Oops, don't want to do that. Okay. Grand Canyon's down here, going right through the Kaibab Plateau. This is where Grand Lake was. Huge. In New Mexico, it's 350 feet deep. In Colorado, it's 1,100 feet deep. In Page, Arizona, it's 1,400 feet. And it went over. This is Vermilion Cliffs. Here's Echo Cliffs. They used to connect right here. When it went over, it cut that canyon, and then it removed all that sediment. So the Kaibab limestone bulged it, it cracked, and then the water went through the crack and undercut Hopi Lake, which is down here. This is Hopi Lakes, and the petrified forest is down there. And then those things just sheet eroded everything here. And then the Kaibab Plateau rose up, and that bulged, and it cracks. Then the water sheet eroding all that sediment, 1,000 feet of sediment everywhere. And you see the remnants of that over down here. There's a, yeah, we can zoom in on that. There's Cedar Butte, which is 900 feet. And over here, there's what did they call that? Cedar Mountain and Red Butte. Red Butte's down here. But anyhow, it's, but he said it was up here somewhere by Quebec Telegraph Flat. Where was that? Telegraph Flat up there. So let's get rid of this. It's, okay, Telegraph Flat. Sedona. Where was Telegraph Flat? Because where's Page, Arizona? Salt Lake City, Albuquerque. There's Page. Okay, and where's Telegraph Flat? Okay, Page, that's where the water was gushing through. I think Telegraph Flat was over here somewhere. Let's see, where did that go? Telegraph Flat, Utah. There it is. That's what Steve Austin thinks the breach point was for that dam. And I don't agree with that. Okay. Telegraph Flat is over there. Where's Page? Page, Arizona is over here. Yeah, that's where it was. So he's got the wrong spot. So anyhow, that was a neat little rabbit trail. All right. That's what he said. Now my comments to Lee's deception in 2008 article. Let me make sure you guys are seeing what I'm seeing. Yeah, that should be okay. Okay. It should be noted that it's very likely that Austin wrote this article shortly after I had sent the earlier version of the letter to nearly 200 creation organizations. A clear point of this letter was and has been that the smoking gun of Austin's plagiarization of Brown's work, and more importantly, its effect on creation science, was the fact that Austin used the Brown's 5,700-foot elevation in his 1989 guidebook as note under Dr. Holroyd's single lake map instead of Holroyd's plotted elevation of 5,577 feet. There seems to me only one logical explanation for Austin doing so. Austin must have heard directly or indirectly one of Brown's lectures or hundreds of radio programs where he made public his discovery that an extinct lake breached at Ecto Vermilion Cliff at the current 5,700-foot level. He may have also heard that Brown was lecturing on how the lake's breaching set in motion events that carved the Grand Canyon. Austin had been trying for years to come up with an explanation for how the Grand Canyon formed and assumed, like so many others, that it must have been a breach dam. But the geology of the area presents many problems that are not solved by simple breach dam explanation. So Austin was unable to publish, hoping for a breakthrough. Now that Austin hears that Brown is lecturing on Brown's Grand Lake breach dam discovery, Austin senses that he has been scooped by Brown. In panic, seeing stardom slipping away, he quickly inserts into his guidebook Holroyd's previously ignored map and uses Brown's 5,700-foot elevation and breach location, and then falsifies the print data in an attempt to claim priority. But my April 9, 2008 letter partially exposed this deception to hundreds of Christian ministries. Therefore, if Austin wants the creation community to ignore my letter, he needs to discredit my allegation that his use of Brown's 5,700-foot level was a strong piece of evidence that Austin did indeed plagiarize Brown. I believe this article by Austin was that attempt, and ICR's Acts and Facts publication was his bullhorn to spread misinformation so he could attempt to cover up his past deeds in the eyes of the creation community. In doing so, he's fallen into the trap that all liars do. They can't keep their stories straight because one false statement begets another until the false statements become mutually exclusive. The following is Austin's same 2008 article with my comments pointing out Austin's false statements and using his own words as proof. Austin, 2008. In 1986, I began the process of mapping the possible shore of the giant lake east of the north of the Grand Canyon. Pastor Lee. In 1994, Austin published his booklet with the endnotes 62 reading, this is in 1994, the outline of the lake was first suggested by computer plotting by Edmund Holroyd, missing talus. Pastor Lee. Which is it, Dr. Austin? Did you map the shoreline or did Holroyd map it and then give it to you? The fact is that he gave it to you. You are again trying to take credit for others' works. Austin, 2008. In addition to Hopi Lake east of Grand Canyon, Pastor Lee. Where does we come from, Dr. Austin? The previous sentence, I began the process. Of course, you and I know you slipped here because you know that we means that Holroyd gave you his work. Austin, 2008. In addition to Hopi Lake east of Grand Lake, we recognized evidence for at least two large lakes in Utah. The largest of these lakes, which I called Canyonlands Lake, was in northern Arizona, southeast Utah, northeastern New Mexico, and western Colorado. Pastor Lee. The false statements and false implications pile up in these two sentences. Hopi Lake, which is in Arizona, not Utah, was discovered and named decades before the controversy began, as Brown explained. Austin never provided evidence that he spoke about or wrote about Grand Lake or Canyonlands Lake or any other major lakes in Utah prior to this controversy. Brown repeatedly asked for such evidence, even a tape recording of any presentation by Austin. The mediators asked for such evidence as well. Austin could produce nothing. By Austin's own admission, he purchased Brown's book as soon as it was available, and only after this date can Austin provide evidence that he wrote about these separate lakes using the same names, elevation, and breach point for Grand Lake that Brown used, but without attribution to Brown. Now putting together Austin's text from the article and his endnote 8. 2008, Austin. In 1986, I began the process of mapping the possible shoreline of the giant lakes east of north of Grand Canyon, Austin. Endnote 2008. Early in 1987, I used topographic data to show that if Grand Canyon were blocked today by a giant man-made dam with 5,700 feet elevation, the lake formed would rise behind the dam to a maximum of 5,620 feet elevation and would extend into 4 states. The overflow location out of that lake at 5,622 feet, 20 feet would be 20 miles east of Kanab, Utah. Oh, 20 miles east. I wonder where that would be. Huh, interesting. Because we know where Telegraph. Oh no, he did say where. It was at Telegraph Flat. Yeah, we know where that is. Okay, Austin, Pastor Lee. Austin did nothing of the sort. Dr. Holroyd did the work to create a map of a single lake at the 5,577 foot elevation, not the 5,700 foot that Austin claims. But even if he did, notice what else he says in the end note. If the dam was 5,700 feet, the lake would overflow at 5,620 feet at Telegraph Flat, which is about 35 miles away from where Dr. Brown discovered and Austin plagiarized as the breach point for Grand Lake. Also notice that now since 2008, Austin is saying that only the imaginary dam is 5,700 feet, not the lake. Why does anyone need to know the dam's height as long as it's higher than the lake? Is Austin now saying that he never used Brown's elevation, but was only referring to the dam? In addition, Austin's endnote 9 of the same article makes reference to endnote 62 of his 1994 book. Austin's endnote. Okay, endnote 62. We must not forget that Austin's endnote 62 on page 110 of his book states, Austin's 1992 94 endnote 62. The outline of the lake was first suggested by computer plotting by Edmund Holroyd III. Field evidence suggests Canyonlands Lake had an elevation of above 5,800 feet in many areas. A lake with significantly different shorelines and lower elevation was suggested by Walt Brown Jr. Brown used the name Grand Lake and proposed Grand Lake, and it covers those. Okay, Holroyd's plotting is superior to Brown's, and the name Canyonlands Lake is preferred. Pastor Lee. In the same 2008 article, Austin claims he discovered a lake behind a 5,700-foot dam, but then makes an endnote in the article, which references an endnote in his 1994 books, which completely contradicts the statement of his 2008 article. In the 1994 book, the reason Austin gave for his Canyonlands Lake being superior to Brown's Grand Lake was because his was at 5,800 feet. If Austin's lake is now 2008 back to Brown's lower number, then by Austin's own reasoning in 1994, Brown's Grand Lake should be considered preferred. Time to throw in the towel, Dr. Austin. I doubt that anyone has picked up on this deception. But again, I find it hard to believe that Austin didn't know he was being deceitful. I should note that when I first read Dr. Austin's 2008 article, I was shocked by the number of false statements and attempted cover-ups, many more than discussed here. I then wrote an email to ICR asking if they stood behind Austin's articles. Sent July 18th, 2008, from Pastor Lee to John Morris, ICR, Walt Brown, and Pastor Kevin Lee. Dear Dr. Morris, I want to thank you for taking my call a few months ago pertaining Dr. Austin's plagiarism of Dr. Brown's work and the adverse effect its actions are having on creation science and on the AiG Museum displays. There have been much correspondence between various parties since we talked. I did not put you or any ICR management on copy for most of it because I gathered from our conversation that you were not interested in taking the time necessary to investigate and deal with the issue. However, because of 2 recent events, I feel I must bother you again for the sake of ensuring my booklet on this matter will be published with accuracy. For background, I have attached Dr. Brown's EndNote 34, which is currently posted in the Grand Canyon chapter of his internet version of In the Beginning, 8th edition. The printer is currently working through some technical problems that have delayed the production of 30,000 books of Dr. Brown's 8th edition. When these problems are corrected in the next few days, the books will be printed with the same EndNote in them. Okay, this is the EndNote. Oh boy. Oh boy, that's a big EndNote. We'll just keep on moving. Oh, wow. Yeah, this is quite the EndNote. Wow. Yeah. I first proposed the hydroplate theory in 1972. In the fall of 1988, I described in lecture and radio broadcasts on more than 100 different stations the location of the former now extinct Grand Lake and how I believe it breaching formed the Grand Canyon. After a year of study and fieldwork at Arizona, Utah, and Colorado, I located the lake boundaries using geological and topographical features. This explanation for the Grand Canyon was published for the first time in July of 1989. Okay, Steve Austin of the Institute of Creation Research has eventually admitted in writing purchasing the 5th edition of In the Beginning in August of 1989, a few weeks after it had been published. In early 1990, Austin published it as if there was his own, some key ideas of mine concerning Grand Lake and the information of the Grand Canyon. I learned on this on May 7th, 1990, but said nothing to anyone about it for 3 years. So he's pretty much going through what we have already going through. For sake of time, we will not read it all, but fascinating. Okay. The EndNote mentions the pastor Diego Rodriguez and I have published a booklet, Canyonlands Lake, a monument to plagiarism. Oh, let's check this out. Okay. Rodriguez, see if that shows up here. Maybe we will take a peek at this. Okay, let's command this. Rodriguez. Okay, what does it say here? Okay, also there is a booklet published by Pastor Kevin Lee and Diego Rodriguez, which analyzes and dissects all of the correspondence and other documents and events pertaining to this dispute. Okay. All right. Okay. So there they are. Monument to plagiarism. That's rather clever. Okay, the EndNotes mentioned that Pastor Diego Rodriguez and I have published a booklet, Canyonlands Lake, a monument to plagiarism, which analyzes and dissects all the correspondence, other documents, and even pertains to Austin's plagiarism. The booklet has not been completed yet, but will be in time for the street release of Dr. Brown's 8th edition, update July 2009. Still not completed still not completed, but this internet published letter will be widely disseminated as a preliminary to the book. It will include AiG and ICR's actions or inactions after I brought my concerns and associated documents to your attention. 2 questions that need to be answered by you to ensure accuracy in Pastor Diego's and my booklet. 1. Does ICR management stand behind the statements made by Austin in the July 2008 Acts and Facts article, Red Rock Pass Spillway of the Bonneville Flood? 2. I recently heard Dr. Austin and Baumgartner were laid off from ICR. If true, and if you feel that any of the reasons behind their termination should be included in Pastor Diego's and my booklet, then please feel free to fill me in. Please acknowledge receipt of this email so I can know you have received it. If I don't hear from you via email, I will be resending via certified letter. Thank you for your time. Sincerely, Kevin Lee. Pastor Lee. Okay, on July 23rd, Morris responded. When was this? This was on July 18th. So a few days later, he responds. Pastor Lee, Steve's situation involves the fact that ICR has moved to Dallas and Steve, for family reasons, is unable to relocate at this time. ICR and Steve are now renegotiating a consulting contract for him to continue his essential work for ICR. We're laid off. Okay, renegotiating. Okay. Pastor Lee, I noted that Dr. Morris did not answer my question about whether they stood behind Austin's article in their Acts and Facts published on July 29th. I wrote from Kevin Lee to John Morris, July 29th. Dear Dr. Morris, thank you for getting back to me in answer to one of my questions. I would still like to hear from you about whether ICR management stands behind the statements made by Austin in the July 2008 Acts and Facts article titled Red Rock Pass, Spillway of the Bonneville Flood. Thank you for your time. Pastor Lee, receiving no answer to the above on September 12th, again, I wrote Pastor Kevin Lee to John Morris, CC'd Walt Brown. Subject, okay, dear Mr. Morris, sincerely hoping things are well with you and yours. I regret the circumstances have caused us to not enjoy the kind of fellowship in Christ that comes with harmony and like-mindedness. I pray that someday we will be able to this side of eternity. However, I truly feel led by the Lord to try to bring correction to the many unbiblical things that are hindering the creation movement ministry, and will continue to persevere until the leading goes away or there is no longer a need to do so. With that said, I'm still looking for a reply to my question about whether ICR management stands behind the statements made by Austin in the July 2008 Acts and Facts article titled Red Rock Pass, Spillway of the Bonneville Flood. I plan to post the article with some comments interdispersed documenting all the false statements made by Steve Austin using his own words and maps from his 1988 to 1999 Grand Canyon guidebook and letters to Brown throughout the article. If you do not go on the record stating that you do not support the article, I will be making it clear in my posting that ICR allowed Austin to use its publication in order to widely disseminate his false statements, which will be shown to be a failed attempt to cover his plagiarism of Dr. Brown's work and the detrimental effects these actions are having on the creation ministry. If you do not support Austin's false statements in your publication, then I look forward to a retraction in the next edition of Acts and Facts, along with how this could have possibly happened in light of receiving documentation in March and April proving Austin's unethical actions and false statements of the past. Please respond to this request, thus saving me the time and expense to send a certified letter. Did you ever read my March 14th and April 9th letter with the links to Austin and Brown's exchanges? A new revision with links to more documents will be coming to you soon for your review before posting it on our website for the first time, able to be read by all who visit our site. I heard that you told someone at the ICC that ICR would not carry Dr. Brown's book because Brown threatened a lawsuit or something to that effect. Did you really say that? If so, it is not true. I will be trying to complete these postings before leaving for Sudan at the end of the month, then on a short-term mission trip. Thanks for your time. Feel free to call because he lives and is coming again, Kevin. Excuse me. Just want to make sure you guys are seeing what I'm seeing. Yep. Do you see what I see? Yes, indeed. We have a comment. And this one says, wow, thanks. Yeah, you're welcome. It is a wow, isn't it? Okay. Attachment 1 to 12. Pastor Lee, after not receiving a response to the above on September 19th, I sent a certified letter forwarding the entire email exchange to ICR stating, Dear Dr. Morris, this is a certified letter version of the email I sent you on September 12, 2008. If I do not hear a reply from you by September 30th, then I will be writing and posting at our website that you, ICR, stand behind all the statements in Austin's Red Rock Pass spillway of the Bonneville Flood article. Thank you for your time, Pastor Kevin Lee. On September 22nd, I received the follow-up U.S. Postal Mail response to the certified letter, retyped here. Dear sir, your certified mail demand letter addressed to Dr. John Morris regarding our July 28 Acts and Facts article by Steve Austin was forwarded to my attention. This is to Lawrence Ford. As I serve as executive editor for all ICR publications, I was disappointed by your threatening tone toward Dr. Morris and ICR regarding our publication of this well-documented article, especially considering your full-time role as an ordained church pastor in Washington State. Nevertheless, Acts and Facts does not plan to issue a retraction of the article, its content, or its author. ICR editorial staff and management have no further comment regarding this issue. Pastor Kevin. Okay, now it's from Lawrence Ford, Director of Communications. Pastor Kevin. He is right. It has been hard to document and expose the unethical behavior of Austin and ICR while also serving my call as full-time pastor, which is why I have been so late in getting revised letter ready for posting. But the history of this discovery must be written, and those trying to create a false story must be refuted for the sake of the truth. This ends the discussion about the false statements and deceptions associated with Austin's Endnote 62, which he published in the second edition of his book in November of 1994 after mediation. The mediator had suggested that Austin return to using the name Grand Lake instead of Canyonlands Lake because that is the name Brown had given the body of water. All the confusion, bad science, false displays in the AiG Museum, wasted time, etc., have been a result of Dr. Austin's refusal to comply with a very simple request, but admittedly would have been very embarrassing to Austin had he complied. December 29th, 1994, letter from Brown to Morris. This letter, and we can see it. It's amazing how these are all right at your fingertips. And we've gone through a lot of these in our journey to the truth. Okay, letter from Morris to Brown. This is the highlight. This letter documents the ways in which Austin and Morris violated the mediation contract with Brown and how they otherwise continue to spread false and misleading information. Brown notified Morris that under these conditions, Brown, would no longer unilaterally hold himself to the contract that Austin and Morris had already broken. In this letter, Brown informs Morris and Austin that he is going to go public with the correspondence because of their failure to comply. Morris then had the audacity to write a response to Dr. Brown saying that ICR and Austin had completely complied with the mediation board and would do so in the future. That's the January 12th letter from Morris to Brown. Yeah, I think we read that one. Yeah, but that's all there for your perusing. Okay. Okay. Had completely complied and to do so in the future, January 12th. Okay. Where Morris writes, as I have often stated before, neither Steve nor any of our staff have ever plagiarized anything you have written or spoken, and we shall not do so in the future. Neither have any of us ever, to our knowledge, defamed you or demeaned your work, either in publications or public meetings, and we shall not do so in the future. Unquote. Morris's denial of past plagiarism are shown to be blatantly false by my letter and its attachments. Morris's promise that there will be no further plagiarism is broken every time someone enters the Grand Canyon display area of the AiG Museum, or every time someone reads Austin's plagiarizing book or read ICR's published articles dripping in plagiarized deceit, acts, and facts. Red Rock Pass spillway of the Bonneville flood. Whoops. Sorry about that. Morris' denial of past defaming was also blatantly false, and well-documented details of which, beginning in 1984, are outside the scope of this letter. Morris promises to Brown that ICR would not defame and demean Brown's work in the future were also broken numerous times, as the remaining discussion and correspondence links show. Let's take a break here. Okay, I just spilled all over myself. Let's just see if it's a mess. Can you see what I spilled? Can you see what I spilled? Do I need to take care of that? Do you want to get me a rag, honey? I spilled tea on me. All right, back at it. Add to stage. All right. Let's see. Plagiarism. I think this is it. Okay, Morris's denial. Letter from Brown. Oh, thank you, honey. Do you want to make it wet, or am I okay? Can you even tell?
Just the thing.
Okay.
Doesn't have the color.
Okay, cool.
I don't think you're gonna be able to wipe off the wet.
Okay. All right.
Making this wet is gonna make it more wet.
Well, as long as it comes out. All right. We'll move on. We'll do what you think is best for it. All right. Morris's denials of past plagiarism are shown to be blatantly false by my letter and its attachments. Let's see. Morris promised that there would be no future plagiarism is broken every time we read that. In another paragraph of the same letter, Morris falsely claims that Slusher's plagiarized work was out of print, out of stock, and would not be reprinted. This claim was proven to be false when Brown purchased from ICR this out of stock, out of print, out of not reprinted book a few weeks later. Morris' denial of past defaming was also blatantly false, and the well-documented details of which, beginning in 1984, are outside the scope of this letter. Morris promises to Brown that ICR would not defame and demean Brown's work in the future, were also broken numerous times, as the remaining discussion and correspondence links show. On June 6, 2006, I had a face-to-face meeting with Mark Rush of ICR at ICR's headquarters in California. In the meeting, I requested that employees of ICR stop slandering and misrepresenting the work of Dr. Brown and gave examples where they had done so. I suggested to Mark that the ICR staff be encouraged to carefully read Dr. Brown's work so that if they critiqued it, they would do so with integrity and knowledge. During our discussion, I even offered to pay the salaries for 3 days if it would likely take them for those to read it, and if after 3 months they felt the time they had been, and of those who read it, if after 3 months they felt the time had been wasted. Mark told me my offer to pay salaries would not be necessary and thought my suggestions that their scientists carefully read Dr. Brown's work were reasonable. After the meeting, Mark asked me to document our discussion in a letter so he could take them to the appropriate managers above them, which I did, and we read that. Okay, I think we might have read that. But dear Mark, okay. But yeah, this is quite a path that he's laying out. Letter to AiG, subject, okay, all right. Which he did. His response to my letter included the following paragraph. 6. Given the long history of disputes between ICR and Walt Brown and the mediation agreements between Walt Brown and Henry Morris and Steve Austin on June 21st, 1994, our leadership team has determined that it would be counterproductive to begin revisiting Walt Brown's theories since we are already familiar with them and potential for agreement is minimal. This paragraph left me, as it probably would most readers, with the impression that Walt Brown may have been the bad guy. The next text of the response letter from Mark Rush is linked into this letter. At the time of the meeting, I was only aware of the conflict between Brown and Austin to the extent described in Dr. Orzesko's book, which I had read. Dr. Orzesko's key paragraph was mentioned earlier in this letter. I had not read the letters between Brown, Austin, and Robinson, nor was I aware of the mediation agreement, conclusion, etc., including the confidentiality clause. How did Mrs. Orzesko learn of the controversy? Mrs. Orzesko was at ICR to interview Dr. Henry Morris for her book that included a chapter on Morris. While browsing through ICR's library, she noticed Austin's book, Grand Canyon Monument to Catastrophe, 1994. From her prior interviews with Brown, she realized that Brown's discussion of his work in and on the Grand Canyon was in conflict with what Austin had written in his book. As a result, she and her husband drove to Phoenix to meet and perhaps confront Brown to clarify the matter. Please note how the effects of Austin's plagiarism lives on to demean Dr. Brown and his work. Brown opened up the entire file of correspondence for her to read. Years later, Brown had informed Austin Morris that because they had broken the agreement in multiple ways within months of the board's ruling, that he, Brown, would no longer unilaterally hold himself to it, and the confidentiality stipulation was no longer binding. Even so, Brown had not raised the issue with others until Orzesko quizzed him. Brown immediately, and in Oresco's presence, wrote Austin, informing him about what he was telling Mrs. Oresco. Brown gave Austin Mrs. Oresco's contact information and invited him to provide her with anything he wanted. Austin remained silent. As noted above, Mrs. Oresco's book explained the controversy, but she omitted Austin and ICR's name. She stated to Dr. Brown that the subject kept her awake at night as she realized the correspondence the controversy would have, or as she realized the consequences the controversy would have. ICR's mentioning of the mediation in their response letter to me raised my curiosity about what had actually happened, but up to that point, I had not personally read any of the correspondence. In December of 2007, I asked Brown if he had an explanation for the reaction I received from a prominent creationist author when I talked to him about Dr. Brown's work. Brown then explained, based on conversation he had with the same gentleman years earlier, a likely reason for his reaction might have been tied to another derogatory story about Brown that was initiated by Henry M. Morris, but perhaps embellished by others. This story put curiosity over the edge. And 18 months after my face-to-face meeting at ICR, I strongly asked Dr. Brown to send me the correspondence relating to the conflict that Mark Raish of ICR mentioned in his letter to me. Now, I also have read the correspondence history and have reached the same conclusion as Mrs. Oresco, that is that Brown has priority over Austin, and that Austin and Morris violated the signed contractual agreement, by leading ultimately to Austin's book being published with false and misleading information that AiG and others are now disseminating widely. It is clear to me that Austin's false information will continue to spread and can cause confusion unless others, besides Oresco and me, are also able to see the correspondence history. Attachment 1 to 5. January 12th, 1995 letter, Morris to Brown. Morris letter to Brown promising there would be no future defaming or demeaning of Dr. Brown's work. Jeremy Schuler's December 26th letter. We read this one. Jeremy, requesting their position on Dr. Brown's hydroplate theory. Jeremy Schuler is a member of my congregation. I was unaware that Jeremy was making this inquiry to ICR. Not that it matters. I also think that it is no coincidence that I had just completed reading the 1993-1994 correspondence history at the same time this dialogue took place between this young believer in our church and ICR. Yeah, we read these. These are on the timeline. Yeah. Yeah, and you can see that this is what ICR's response to his letter. Let's just take a look at this, and we're just going to go in from, this is the letter. You want to find it, just Command F, laughable. Laughable. Okay, this is what they say in the letter, and this is probably what he's quoting. You know, it starts out, it says that they does not have an official position about Walt Brown's science. And then down here, in her critique of Brown's geological abilities, one of our geologists says, Dr. Brown is a physicist, engineer, not a geologist, nor even a geophysicist like Michael Ord and many other well-meaning and sincere creationists. He has stepped way out of his field and speaks with the same level of authority as if it were his field. His hydroplate theory should never be compared on the same level of seriousness as catastrophic plate tectonics. He has never welcomed peer review or any level of criticism as far as I know. This is a grave mistake, in my opinion. His ideas look very impressive to someone not trained, but believe me, they are utterly laughable to one who has any training in geoscience. Okay, so that's probably what he said. Yeah, that's the quote. Bruce Wood of ICR responded by writing, his ideas look very impressive to someone not trained, but believe me, they are utterly laughable to anyone who has any training in geoscience. Dr. Wood then gives 8 alleged flaws associated with Dr. Brown's hydroplate theory. These 8 items are so off the mark in being an honest critique of Dr. Brown's work and only prove that ICR staff has almost zero knowledge of what Dr. Brown is teaching. It was precisely these kinds of ignorant and false statements that statements made in letters by ICR for years that led me to meet with them face to face on June 6, 2006, to encourage them to read Dr. Brown's work so they could be more accurate in any future critiques. Mark Rasha of the ICR responded to Pastor Lee in his letter of June 20th, saying, I was informed that several members of our faculty are quite familiar with Walt Brown's hydroplate theory and strongly disagree with it, and that ICR's personnel were already familiar with them. Brown's writings and potential for agreement is minimal, unquote. I wasn't asking for agreement. I was asking for their accuracy. In the light of the above response to Jeremy Schuler, either ICR lied to me when they said they were familiar with Dr. Brown's work, or they lied to Jeremy Schuler in this email. In either case, letters like this are defaming or demeaning to Dr. Brown's work and reputation in the creation science community, something Morris promised ICR would never do. ICR should prayerfully consider what God thinks about this and make corrections now. And you can read those letters. We've read them already. Okay, attachment 2, additional facts associated with Austin's ethical lapse. These following facts were contained in the body of my original letter to AIG on March 14, 2008. However, they are further clarified and documented based on the response to my April 9 letter. The increased volume of this documented correspondence and discussion necessitates moving the material to this attachment in an effort to shorten the main body of the letter. Oh boy. The following bullet items chronicle Austin's further attempts to cover up his plagiarism by using other people's work to claim priority over Brown and avoiding setting the record straight. At mediation, Austin tried to claim priority by referring to another obscure publication, hand-drawn map by one of his students, now Dr. John Whitmore, that predated Brown's. Austin used Whitmore's map in his 1986 guidebook and gave him credit in the caption. Now in mediation, Austin uses Whitmore's map as if it is his, but Dr. Whitmore's hand-drawn map did not discuss any lake, much less Grand Lake's location, shape, and name, breach point, and any other details, and certainly no evidence or mechanism. Okay, Dr. Whitmore received my April 9 letter, and he wrote to me to rebut the claim that Austin plagiarized Brown by saying his term paper, one page of which was the map, gave him and Austin priority. In a phone conversation, I pointed out that I was familiar with the map from his term paper and noted to him that since the map did not show any lake, let alone Grand Lake, that I could not accept his claim that it exonerated Austin. Let's see the map. Oh boy, that's the map. Oh yeah, I guess so. All right. Okay. All right. Yeah, I'm not buying that one. Okay, Dr. Whitmore sharply rebutted that I could not possibly know about his map from the term paper because he had never published it. I then realized that he could not have read my letter very carefully because it contained a link to this map with his name on it, just as it appears 2 paragraphs above. As a follow-up to the phone call, I sent the following email to Dr. Whitmore. Dear Dr. Whitmore, I want to thank you again for taking my call April 12, 2008. As a follow-up to our conversation, I was wondering if you had time to carefully read my letter as it pertains to your 1985 map being posted at our website. Specifically, was I in error to attribute the map at the link below to you? See this publication. If I am correct, the above link is page 48 of Austin's 1986 guidebook, and although he attributes the map to you, it is clear that nothing about your map or statements in the guidebook talks of a breach dam explanation for the Grand Lake. The area that you and Austin call are the Batacachi Formation is, of course, better known as the extinct Hopi Lake. It was discovered decades before you, Austin, or Brown. If the Austin Whitmore map link above is accurate in depicting you as the author of the map, then the following paragraph of my letter also has a link to your work. Okay, 2 years after your work goes into Austin's 1986 guidebook, his 1988 guidebook, page 45, includes a modified version of your map without attribution to you. You will also notice that in your using your map, Austin does not discuss any breach dam scenario. In fact, he uses your map as if it is his and minus the Baitakaachi formation to talk about how he was thinking during his older days. Figure 2, explanation of how Grand Canyon was eroded according to the antecedent river theory before the Kaibab upwarp occurred 70 million years ago. The ancestral Colorado River was flowing westward through northern Arizona. Okay, the Grand Canyon was eroded by slow downcutting by the Colorado River as the Kaibab upwarp occurred. This process, of course, the present course of the Colorado River was inherited from the ancestral river after tens of millions of years of uplift and erosion. Did you know that he was publishing a modified version of your map in his 1988 guidebook without attribution? Did you know that his discussion of your map was from an old Earth perspective? After reading my letter of March 14, I hope you will agree that nothing in your map comes close to being an independent find of Dr. Brown's discovery of Grand Lake at 5,700 feet elevation, its breach point at what is today the north end of Marble Canyon, resulting in the undermining of Hopi Lake, resulting in its breaching, thus allowing both lakes to carve the Grand Canyon in a matter of weeks in the recent past. Dr. Brown's theory is not troubled by Kaibab upwarp because it is a result of these events instead of an obstacle to them, which is unique to Brown and the only explanation that makes scientific sense. If I have made any mistake in what I said about you, please let me know. I want to be as accurate as possible. Since you stated that your letter to me was private, I am only sending this to you with a copy to Dr. Brown and blind copies to my elders. If the privacy status of your letter is to be changed, then please let me know. Thank you for your time. Dr. Whitmore and I then traded another couple emails where I requested that he provide documented evidence to point out any erroneous statements in my letter dealing with my assertions that Austin plagiarized Brown's work. He refused. The following is a small excerpt of my concluding correspondence with Dr. Whitmore. Okay, this is from John Whitmore to Kevin. After reading this note, earlier email, I'm convinced that you did not listen to or acknowledge anything I had to say in our phone conversation. There continued to be inaccuracies, which he refused to point out in your statements below, despite what I told you. Therefore, I am unwilling to discuss this matter with you further. It will not further the kingdom of Christ. Kevin Lee, therefore, have noted that you refused to point out a single inaccuracy in my March 14th, 2008 letter or in my email that you are referring to. I therefore conclude, and so will everyone else, that what I have posted about your no lake, no elevation, no breach point, no breach location map is factual. Thus, you have not, and I suspect you cannot show using facts that your 1985 paper gives priority of Grand Lake, 5,700 feet, breach point, etc., to you and Austin. Thus, I conclude that the facts continue to support that Austin plagiarized Brown's Grand Lake, its elevation, its breach point, etc., where he published it as his own in the 1988-1990 guidebook. The facts also continue to show that he falsified information in the 1994 edition of his book, including the note about your work. This fact will also be clarified when I respond to Austin. Your refusal to discuss the matter any further, after not giving any examples of inaccuracy, will be seen for what it is by all who read my soon-to-be posted response to Dr. Austin's desperate attempt to use your work to cover his plagiarism. In the interest of giving you and Austin the benefit of the doubt before finishing my letter to Austin, sending it to him, and sending it to all the creation ministries as an update to my earlier mailing, I will wait 1 week to give you time to send me your entire research paper that was submitted to Dr. Austin in 1985. You said you have found it, and during our conversation on April 12th, I requested that you send me a copy. Did you already? My address is blank. When I receive your paper and read about yours and Austin's discovery of Grand Lake separate from Hopi Lake at an elevation of 5,700 feet, breaching at what is now the north end of the Marble Canyon, thus carving the Grand Canyon in a matter of weeks in the recent past, then I will obviously have a lot of crow to eat and will be begging forgiveness from hundreds. Of course, I will wonder why Austin didn't provide this information during 1, the 1-year-long exchange of letters with Dr. Brown, 2, during the mediation agreement, or 3, during the months after when letters were exchanged between Dr. Brown and Austin about Austin's refusal to comply with the mediators board's determinations. If I do not receive your paper by April 26, 2008, then I will assume that it is because your work does not contain these items, and thus the record will continue to show that Austin plagiarized these details from Brown in 1988 and 1989. Please feel free to call me if you have trouble meeting this deadline. It should be noted that I never did receive a copy of Dr. Whitmore's 1985 research paper, and I do assume it is because Whitmore's complete work does not support Austin's claim of priority, claiming Whitmore's claim of assisting in Austin's priority. I beg the reader to try to find Grand Lake, its elevation and breach point in this hand-drawn Whitmore map. So there you go. Where is it? The breach point, the elevation, I don't see it. Okay, but you can look later. Doesn't it make sense that Whitmore and Austin would want to release Whitmore's 1985 paper if it supported Austin's claim of accomplishment and priority? Why haven't they? Austin only brought the hand-drawn Whitmore map to the mediation meeting in the final desperate attempt to convince them that he had priority over Brown. He failed because the mediation panel was unimpressed. If this was the strongest piece of evidence he could provide from Whitmore's work, it is unlikely that the rest of Whitmore's paper provided anything of substance. There, Austin and Whitmore refusal to divulge the rest of the paper shows they need to hide the truth, that they have been less than honest about Whitmore and Austin's combination. My invitation is still open for Whitmore and or Austin to provide the rest of Whitmore's research paper for all to read. If it does indeed provide information about Grand Lake, how it was separate from Hopi Lake, its elevation and breach point, all predating Dr. Brown's discoveries and writings, then I will change this posting accordingly after doing forensics on the original paper. Not that I don't trust them. From the time Austin was confronted by Brown in 1993, Austin continued, along with Henry Morris, to stonewall, avoid, and deny all meaningful discussion on the matter for many months. At mediation, Austin failed to convince the mediation board that Brown's charges of plagiarism were unfounded, to the extent that Peter Robinson determined in his November 14, 1994 letter to Austin and Brown that Austin give Brown credit in the next printing of Austin's book by inserting the following paragraph into Austin's endnote 40. In 1989, Walt Brown Jr., in proposing the hydroplate theory, also proposed where a very large lake at elevation 5,700 feet once occupied much of southeast Utah, parts of Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico. Brown named it Grand Lake and wrote that it breached between what is now Vermilion Cliffs and Echo Cliffs. This, in turn, eroded the western bank of Hopi Lake. All waters released eroded the Grand Canyon. As directed by the mediator, Austin did correct endnote 40 in the next printing of the book, but he refused to change the name back to Grand Lake, as Robertson had directed in his September 12th letter to Austin and Brown. The readers should ponder why Austin refused to change the name of the lake back to Grand Lake and the extreme measures Austin took to get Robinson to change his original direction to Austin to change the lake name in his September 21st, 1994 letter to a suggestion to do so in his November 14th letter. Understanding motive is the key to unlocking every mystery. Why was Austin so motivated to fight Robinson's September 21st determination? The answer is found in realizing how changing the name back to Grand Lake would have been an extreme embarrassment to Austin and quite possibly a career stopper. Consider the following sequence, which could explain Austin's actions. For 3 years, Austin plagiarized Brown's name for the lake, Grand Lake. However, Austin was writing and lecturing as if he had discovered the lake and was preparing to publish his book, Grand Canyon, Monument to Catastrophe. In June of 1993, 6 months before Austin is ready to publish, Brown challenges Austin about his plagiarism of Brown's work. At first, Austin tells Brown that he came up with the name Grand Lake independent of Brown and his false copyright proves it. He later admits in a later letter to the lead mediator, Professor Peter Robinson, dated August 29, 1994, that he took the name from Brown. Unfortunately, I did not reference Brown as the source of the name Grand Lake until the 1993 issue of the Grand Canyon Field Guide Study Tour Guidebook. That lack of citation of Brown in the earlier issues, 90 to 92 of the Field Guidebook, may have led some to believe that I was the source of the name Grand Lake. That supposition is, of course, incorrect. Austin and Morris then tried to deny in a sequence of letter exchanges with Brown between June of 1993 and January of 1994 that Austin plagiarized Brown's work, and that they also deny that Austin accused Brown of plagiarism. Austin as witness were ready to testify. Wait a minute. Austin and Brown then tried to deny in a sequence of letters exchanges between Brown in June of 1993 and January of 1994 that Austin plagiarized Brown's work. And they also deny that Austin accused Brown of plagiarizing Austin as the witnesses were ready to testify. While Austin was given their names and phone numbers, he made no effort to contact them or contradict or correct their recollection in their presence. Austin now realizes that if he publishes his book with the name Grand Lake, he will be challenged by those who hear Brown's rebuttals. Therefore, apparently, Austin came up with his own lake name, Canyonlands Lake, and then starts the deception of claiming this lake is different from the superior to Brown's Grand Lake. Austin publishes his book in January of 1994 with many false statements about Grand Lake discovery. Brown's original concerns about the effect of Austin's plagiarism and false statements are now exacerbated by Austin's additional published deceptions. The letter exchanges continue between Brown and Austin and Morris, who refuse Brown's requests that they set the record straight. Brown then demands binding arbitration or he will go public with Austin's plagiarism. Austin and Morris agree in writing to arbitration, but at the last minute refuse arbitration. Arbitration is binding, mediation is not. The mediation is held and concluded. The mediation panel concludes that Austin needs to make corrections to his book, and Austin and Morris fight for and get a confidentiality clause as part of the signed agreement. The corrections were to be inserted into Austin's remaining books if there were more than 1,000 copies remained. Inserted corrections made to remaining inventories of published books are referred to in the publishing world as errata sheets. It is embarrassing for an author to insert an errata sheet into his or her published work. It is a big flag saying they were careless to the extent the corrections must have been made before. Careless to the extent the corrections must be made before the next edition. In Austin's case, it would be admitting he prevented his readers from knowing that the record shows it was Dr. Brown, not Austin, who first discovered, named, lectured on, and published about Grand Canyon, and thus also hindered those same readers from knowing where to get all the scientific evidence for how Grand Lake breached and thus formed the Grand Canyon. Apparently, to avoid this embarrassment, Austin used several deceptive measures to break his signed agreement to insert the errata sheet into his remaining inventory of books. A man of integrity would have admitted the error and corrected it, like Dr. Randall Price did in his book, The Original Bible, 2007, where an errata sheet was inserted in the beginning saying, the section entitled, What About Errors in the Manuscript on page 115 to 16 contains original statistical information produced by Daniel B. Wallace and is taken from his chapter, we can trust the can we trust the New Testament, the quality and quantity of textual variants as contained by so-and-so and James Sawyer and Daniel Wallace reinventing Jesus? What do the Da Vinci codes and other novel speculations don't tell you? Please note that Randall's failure to give attribution has no effect on the reader being able to understand the topic. However, Austin's failure to attribute Brown's discovery of an extinct lake, Grand Lake, separate from Hopi Lake, its elevation, its breach point, prevents not by pointing people to Brown's associated explanation of how it breached, prevents one from understanding all the reasons for the Grand Lake explanation for the origin of Grand Canyon and how this supports the flood of Noah and its aftermath. To avoid having to place an errata sheet in his remaining books and make changes in the next edition of his book, Austin throws up numerous distractions after wading through the volumes of post-mediation arguments raised by Austin. The lead mediator directs Austin to use the name Grand Lake in the next edition of Austin's book and to make it clear that it was Brown that discovered the lake. Austin realizes that he must fight this determination with all the deception he can. Why? Because if the next edition of his book changes Canyonlands Lake to Grand Lake, then it will beg the question, Steve, why did you change the name of the lake? The truthful answer, because I made up the name Canyons Land to try to cover up that I plagiarized Brown's use of Grand Canyon for 3 years. Brown brought the evidence of my plagiarism to mediation board, and the lead mediator told me to change the name back to Grand Lake and give credit to Brown. Had Austin been truthful and the confidentiality clause would have been meaningless, and the entire Creation Science Society community would have been shocked by the behavior of Austin, Morris, and ICR, although most evolutionists would not have been. Therein lays the apparent reason that Austin went into full court press against the lead mediator's determination that the lake name should be changed. Austin used a bogus excuse that the lake could not be named Grand Lake because of federal requirements and told the mediator that he did not have the authority over the feds to maintain the name of the lake. The mediator conceded that he may not have the authority, but encouraged Austin to change the name anyway, an encouragement Austin ignored, which is why this sorry tale has to be made public for the sake of the truth. Wow. Wow. What a tangled web. Boy, did Pastor Lee put a lot of information into this. Wow. Okay, so what's coming next? Let's see what's, oh boy. Lee response to Holroyd. We'll see that. Oh, anyway. But anyhow, let's go see what's on the timeline. Creation timeline. That was a lot. Let's see here. We'll go on to the timeline. We'll scroll. We did this. This is the mediation arbitration. This is when Pastor Lee gets involved. Was this the June 5th? No. This was Brown's plagiarism at the AiG Museum. That's where it was in 2008. Where's that dot? Now we're going to have lead response to Holroyd coming up next. 2008, and what's left on this saga? How many more do we got to go? Okay, very interesting. And then there's going to be a big gap until 2018. So we're getting there. We're getting there. All right. Yeah, we are definitely getting there. So thank you again. Let me just end this. We don't need that anymore. And let's remove this. Put this comment out there again. Wow. Thanks. Yes. Wow. It is. That was 2 hours and 43 minutes of Pastor Lee reading what he did. Just imagine how much research he did to put together all that information. So that is all available. We want just people to get all the information, come to your own conclusions. And so he sent all that information to Answers in Genesis, and Answers in Genesis was going to have their lawyers look at it, and it'll be interesting to see how they respond. But I know when I went to it and it went to the Creation Museum and I saw Canyonlands Lake, I was rather disappointed and rather confused also. So this is getting to the bottom of this. And they promote the catastrophic plate tectonics, which doesn't explain it fully. And it can't explain things where the hydroplate theory does. And so that's why we're doing all this reading. That's why we're shining the light on it, because there is a theory that makes accurate predictions and it's not being used by scientists, which is a tragedy. But there are people growing up, coming up through the ranks, I believe, that do like the hydroplate theory, and this will be the truth. And it's just a matter of what side of the avalanche are you going to be on? Are you going to be on the side of truth, where you're going to allow people to think in your museum with two different models and come to their own conclusion? Or are you going to be and allow this avalanche of truth to just to wipe out all of Satan's lies? Or are you going to resist the truth and get bowled over? Like the catastrophic plate tectonics, that quietly went away. That should have publicly been buried. And I think Bob Enyart does a show on that. And also he says that plate tectonics is done, catastrophic plate tectonics too. So it's just a matter of time. We have a theory, again, makes accurate predictions. It can explain all these things, explains 25 major features on Earth and in the solar system, and NASA discoveries are validating it. And so that's what we need. This, again, is a grassroots movement. And what can we do? We can start asking questions. Why aren't you using a theory that makes accurate predictions? I wish somebody could explain that to me. It makes absolutely no sense to me at all. And so hopefully, the light will shine, the truth will prevail, and you can be part of this exciting adventure. This is akin to, people saying, no, the sun goes around the earth. And that's the only way they can think, where this is similar too. This is a paradigm shift. And when the hydroplate theory gets into the mainstream, the Big Bang's over, because the hydroplate theory, it can explain what's out there and the Big Bang can't. And so we encourage you to get involved and start asking questions wherever you go. Creation speakers, online, creation websites, articles, when you go into the museums. And again, encourage people to get the Walt Brown merch. Wear this stuff when you go through the museum. All NASA scientists work for Walt Brown. So this is plenty long. We're going to cut it off here. Thank you so much for joining this journey with me through this journey of deception. Thank you, and we will continue the process, and we'll get to the bottom of this. May God bless and guide you, and may the